The desert never leaves you. Not really. Richard Iron Harmon jolted awake, his weathered hands clutching the sheets. The digital clock on his nightstand read 3:17 a.m., its red glow the only light in the room. Sweat dampened his gray crew cut, a remnant from 35 years of military service he'd never abandoned. His heart thundered in his chest like the main gun of an Abrams tank. The dream again, Madonna Ridge, February 27, 1991. Harmon swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling every one of his 68 years in the creak of his knees. He'd been having this dream more frequently lately. The anniversary was coming up. 35 years since Operation Desert Storm. 35 years since the largest tank battle in American military history since World War II. He didn't bother turning on the lights. He knew every inch of this house by heart, had built much of it with his own hands after retiring from the Army 12 years ago. His fingers traced the wall as he made his way to the kitchen, passing the hallway lined with photographs and shadow boxes of medals. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart, tokens of valor that couldn't begin to capture what had happened in the Iraqi desert that day. In the kitchen, Harmon poured himself a glass of water, then hesitated before opening the cabinet above the refrigerator. Inside sat a bottle of bourbon he kept for nights like this. He considered it, then closed the cabinet without taking it out. He had an early meeting tomorrow. The Pentagon didn't appreciate hungover advisors, even decorated ones. Instead, he carried his water into his study, flipping on the desk lamp. The room was a shrine to his military career. Display cases held unit patches, challenge coins, and various mementos from his years of service. But dominating the wall opposite his desk was a large framed photograph. 4 men standing proudly in front of an M1A1 Abrams tank, its massive cannon angled skyward. Painted on its turret in bold white letters, Steel Thunder. Harmon stared at the photo, at the 4 faces grinning through desert dust. Younger versions of himself and his crew. William Thompson, his gunner, whose eagle eye and steady hand had never failed them. Carlos Mendez, their driver, who could make 70 tons of steel dance through the dunes. And Robert Mitchell, their loader, whose lightning hands had kept the 120 rounds flowing during the critical moments of battle. They looked so young, too young to be tasked with what they'd done, too young to carry the memories they still shouldered. His desk was meticulously organized, as befitted a former Army officer. At the center lay a leather portfolio with the Pentagon seal embossed on its cover. Inside were the briefing papers for tomorrow's meeting. The Future Combat Tank Program, FCTP, the Army's next generation of armored warfare, designed to meet the evolving threats of a world growing more dangerous by the day. They'd called him 3 weeks ago, a general he'd served with in Iraq, now with 4 stars on his shoulders, asking if Harmon would consider serving as special advisor to the program. "We need someone who's been there," the general had said. "Someone who knows what it means to fight in these machines. Not just theory, reality." Harmon had accepted immediately. Civilian life had its comforts, but purpose, that was harder to find once you took off the uniform. This was purpose, a chance to ensure the next generation of tankers had the best possible machine beneath them when they rolled into harm's way. His fingers traced the photograph. Steel Thunder. They'd been unstoppable that day at Medina Ridge. 7 confirmed kills against Iraqi Republican Guard T-72s. 7 direct hits. No misses. Thompson's gunnery skills had been supernatural. The Iraqi tanks had simply vanished in pillars of flame and smoke, one after another. The citation for his Distinguished Service Cross mentioned extraordinary heroism in combat, but failed to capture the case, the noise, the smell of burnt metal and cordite, the radio chatter punctuated by explosions that shook your teeth loose. It didn't mention the way time seemed to stretch and compress, how seconds felt like hours and hours passed in heartbeats. The dream was always the same. The last Iraqi tank, its turret traversing toward them. Thompson's voice, unnaturally calm. Sabat, loaded, target acquired. Harmon's order, fire. The cannon's thunderclap, the enemy tank erupting into flame. And then the unexpected, a wounded Iraqi soldier emerging from the inferno, clothes ablaze, running blindly toward them. That's where the dream always ended, leaving Harmon gasping in the dark, tasting desert sand in his mouth. He checked his watch, almost 4 now. No point in trying to sleep again. Harmon opened the portfolio and began reviewing the briefing papers once more. He wanted to be sharp for this meeting. It wasn't every day you got called to help shape the future of American armored warfare. The sky outside his window was just beginning to lighten when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a Pentagon number, a bit early, even for military types. Harmon, he answered, his voice carrying the natural authority of a man accustomed to command. Captain Harmon, this is Colonel Westfield, General Carter's aide. It's just Mr. now, Colonel. Been retired a while. Once a captain, always a captain, sir, especially in your case. A pause. The general asked me to call. There's been a development. The meeting's been moved up. Car will pick you up in 45 minutes. That's awfully quick. What's happened? The general will brief you himself, sir. The car will have the necessary clearances to bring you directly in. Harmon's spine straightened involuntarily. He recognized the tone, the careful choice of words. Something significant had happened. Something that couldn't be discussed over an unsecured line. I'll be ready, he said. 40 minutes later, Harmon stood on his front porch in his best suit, a travel mug of coffee in his hand. His go bag, another habit he'd never abandoned, sat at his feet. The eastern sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson. A new day dawning. A black Suburban with government plates pulled into his driveway exactly on time. As Harmon slid into the back seat, nodding to the stone-faced security officer who held the door, he felt an odd sense of homecoming. The military precision, the sense of urgent purpose, the knowledge that somewhere a clock was ticking. It felt like coming alive again. Chapter 2. Memories and New Responsibilities. The Pentagon hadn't changed. Same labyrinthine corridors, same institutional lighting, same mix of uniforms and suits moving with purposeful strides. Harmon's visitor badge felt strange on his lapel. He'd spent the latter part of his career with the kind of clearance that made such identification unnecessary. Colonel Westfield met him at the security checkpoint. A tall woman with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore Army service dress with the combat patch of the 1st Armored Division on her right shoulder. A combat veteran herself. Captain Harmon, she said, extending her hand. An honor, sir. Your reputation precedes you. Hopefully the good parts, Harmon said with a slight smile. And again, it's just Mr. these days. Not around here, sir. Follow me, please. General Carter is waiting. They wound through corridors, passing offices and conference rooms. Harmon noticed the security growing progressively tighter. More guards, more electronic locks, fewer people in the hallways. Whatever they were heading toward was classified well above the pay grade of most Pentagon employees. Finally, they reached a secure conference room. 2 armed guards stood outside, checking credentials with meticulous care. Inside, a group of senior officers and civilian officials were gathered around a large table. At the head sat General Maxwell Carter, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders. He'd been a major during Desert Storm, commanding a tank company that had fought alongside Harmon's at Medina Ridge. Now he was one of the most powerful men in the U.S. military. "Rich," Carter said, rising to greet him with a firm handshake. "Thanks for coming on such short notice." "Max," Harmon replied. Military formality dissolved between old comrades in arms. "What's the fire drill about?" Carter's face grew serious. "We've got a situation. Take a seat." Once everyone was settled, Carter nodded to a civilian wearing the insignia of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The room dimmed, and a large screen on the wall illuminated with satellite imagery. 3 days ago, the intelligence officer began, our surveillance satellites captured these images at a military testing facility in Asia. What you're seeing is the first confirmed test of their new main battle tank, codenamed Dragon. The image sharpened, showing a low-profile vehicle with an unusually streamlined turret. Even from the aerial view, Harmon could tell it was unlike any tank he'd seen before. "We've been tracking their development program for years," the intelligence officer continued, "but this represents a significant acceleration of their timeline. Our previous estimates suggested they were at least 5 years from a working prototype." Another image appeared, showing the tank firing at a distant target. The quality was remarkable. Harmon could clearly see a distinctive blue flash from the cannon. "That's not a conventional round," he said, leaning forward. "That's an electromagnetic discharge." The intelligence officer nodded. "Correct, Captain. The Dragon appears to be equipped with what we're calling an EMRG, electromagnetic railgun, similar to what we've been developing for naval applications, but miniaturized for a tank platform." Harmon felt a chill run through him. He'd read the theoretical papers on such weapons. capable of accelerating a projectile to velocities that made conventional tank rounds look like they were standing still. No existing armor could withstand a direct hit from such a weapon. How the hell did they solve the power problem? He asked. The energy requirements for an EMRG are enormous. You'd need a nuclear reactor to power something like that in a tank chassis. That's one of several questions we're trying to answer, Carter said. But the evidence is right in front of us. They've done it somehow. And if these images are accurate, they're well into the testing phase. More images appeared. The Dragon tank maneuvering across rough terrain, firing from different positions, even a night shot showing it operating in complete darkness. Our analysts believe they're 6 to 8 months from limited production, the intelligence officer said. Possibly less if they rush things. Harmon sat back, processing the implications. The Abrams M1A2 SEPV-3, America's most advanced tank, was a formidable machine. But against something like this, it would be outclassed in every category that mattered. This is why we've accelerated the FCTP, Carter said, bringing the lights back up. We can't afford to be caught flat-footed. The future of American armored warfare is at stake. He gestured to a stack of folders being distributed around the table. Inside, you'll find everything we know about the Dragon, its specifications, capabilities, and our best assessment of its vulnerabilities. I want everyone in this room to understand exactly what we're up against. Harmon opened his folder, scanning the technical data. The Dragon's armor was described as a nano-composite matrix, lightweight but reportedly able to defeat both kinetic and chemical energy projectiles. Its main gun was indeed an electromagnetic rail system, capable of launching a variety of projectiles at velocities approaching Mach 10. Its targeting system integrated advanced AI with multispectral sensors that could allegedly identify and prioritize targets automatically, even through smoke, dust, or active countermeasures. If even half of these specifications were accurate, the Dragon represented a quantum leap in tank design. The president has authorized a special black budget for our response, Carter continued. The Future Combat Tank Program has been designated a national security priority. Funding won't be an issue. He turned to Harmon. Rich, I asked you here because we need more than just technical expertise. We need someone who understands tank warfare at a visceral level. Someone who's been inside that steel coffin when the shells start flying. Someone who knows what works not just on paper, but in the chaos of actual combat. Harmon nodded slowly. I understand. What I'm about to propose goes beyond a simple advisory role, Carter said. I want you to assemble a special team, a mix of combat veterans who know the reality of tank warfare and cutting-edge engineers who can push the technological boundaries. This team will work in parallel with our main development group, but with more freedom to take risks, to challenge conventions. He leaned forward, his expression intense. In short, Rich, I want you to build me a tank that can beat the Dragon. The room fell silent. Harmon could feel the weight of every eye upon him. I'll need resources, he said finally, and autonomy. No bureaucratic red tape. You'll have it, Carter promised. Whatever you need. And I want my old crew, Harmon added. Thompson, Mendez, and Mitchell, if they're willing. A slight smile crossed Carter's face. I thought you might say that. We've already located them. They're all still alive, all still civilians. Initial discreet inquiries suggest they might be interested in one last mission. Harmon felt something stir in his chest. Steel Thunder reunited after all these years. It seemed impossible, yet somehow perfect. When do I start? He asked. You already have, Carter replied. There's a secure facility waiting for you in Nevada. Your team will begin assembling there tomorrow. Colonel Westfield will handle the logistics. As the meeting concluded, Harmon remained seated, staring at the folder in front of him. Images of the Dragon tank seemed to swim before his eyes, merging with memories of Iraqi T-72s silhouetted against the desert horizon. Different machines, different era, same fundamental problem. How to defeat the enemy's armor before it defeated yours. That night, in a secure Pentagon guest suite, Harmon dreamed of Medina Ridge again. But this time, when the Iraqi tank erupted into flame, the burning figure that emerged wasn't an enemy soldier. It was a mirror image of himself, 35 years younger, uniform ablaze, reaching out with desperate hands. He awoke gasping, the phantom smell of burning diesel and flesh lingering in his nostrils. Outside the window, Washington, D.C. glittered beneath a blanket of stars. Somewhere across the globe, the Dragon tank was being prepared for production, a new kind of predator, readying itself for future battlefields. And Richard Harmon had just agreed to create its nemesis. Chapter 3, The Veteran Team. The Nevada desert stretched to the horizon, a sea of sand and scrub broken only by distant mountain ranges. The morning sun cast long shadows across the landscape, the light sharp and unforgiving. It reminded Harmon of Iraq, though the terrain was different. Desert was desert in the end, harsh, uncompromising, honest in its hostility. The secure facility turned out to be an old weapons testing range, repurposed for the FCTP, a collection of buildings surrounded by multiple layers of security fencing, guard posts, and electronic surveillance. The kind of place that didn't appear on any map, where satellite imagery would show nothing but empty desert. Harmon stood outside the main research building, squinting against the sunlight. He'd arrived the previous evening, too late to do much beyond check into his quarters, Spartan but comfortable, with a distinct military efficiency to their layout. Now, with a cup of black coffee warming his hand, he surveyed what would be his domain for the foreseeable future. Behind him, the door opened. Colonel Westfield emerged, tablet in hand. "Your first team member arrives in 20 minutes, Captain," she said. "William Thompson. Transport is bringing him in from Reno now." Harmon nodded. Bill was always punctual. Some things never change. The others will be arriving throughout the day. Mendez this afternoon, Mitchell this evening. The technical specialists start tomorrow. "I want to meet them one at a time," Harmon said. "Re-establish the connections before we bring in the new blood." "Of course, sir. I've arranged it exactly that way." She consulted her tablet. "Also, General Carter asked me to give you this, for your eyes only." She handed him a small flash drive, the kind with military-grade encryption that required biometric authentication to access. "What is it?" Harmon asked, pocketing the drive. "Additional intelligence on the Dragon project. Came in overnight. The general thought you should see it immediately." Before he could ask more, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon, a vehicle approaching along the private road that served the facility. Harmon felt his pulse quicken slightly. Bill Thompson, his gunner, the man whose steady hand and keen eye had been responsible for 7 confirmed kills at Medina Ridge. The man who'd saved their lives more than once with his preternatural ability to spot enemy tanks before they themselves were spotted. "I'll leave you to your reunion," Westfield said, retreating back inside. Harmon watched the approaching vehicle, memories flooding back. The interior of the Abrams, cramped and chaotic during battle. The thunder of the main gun firing. The concussion you felt in your bones. Thompson's voice, always calm, reporting targets acquired and destroyed with the detached precision of a surgeon announcing successful procedures. The vehicle, another black Suburban, pulled to a stop 20 yards away. The rear door opened, and a tall man in jeans and a faded red polo shirt emerged. Silver hair, a bit thinner than Harmon remembered, but the same ramrod straight posture. The same watchful eyes constantly scanning the environment. Once a tanker, always a tanker. Thompson spotted him immediately. A smile broke across his weathered face. "Captain," he called, striding forward with the easy gait of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Sergeant," Harmon replied, falling back into the old forms of address without thinking. They clasped hands, then, formality forgotten, embraced briefly. 35 years fell away in an instant. "You look good, Rich," Thompson said, stepping back to appraise him. "Retirement agrees with you." "Semi-retirement," Harmon corrected. "Been doing some consulting, keeping my hand in." "You?" "Running a machine shop in Lubbock. Nothing fancy, but it keeps me busy. Working with metal all my life, seems I can't get away from it." They began walking toward the main building, falling into step together with the unconscious synchronization of men who'd served together in the close quarters of a tank. "They told me it was important," Thompson said, "national security, that you were involved. That was enough for me." "It is important, Bill. Maybe the most important thing we've done since Desert Storm." "That's serious?" "That's serious. I'll brief you fully once the others arrive. But yes, we're looking at a game changer. The kind that keeps generals up at night." Thompson nodded, accepting this without further question. Another quality that made him an exceptional soldier. The ability to trust his commanding officer's judgment. "How's the family?" Harmon asked as they reached the building. "Good. Rebecca's still putting up with me, 43 years now. Kids are all grown. 4 grandkids, if you can believe it. Oldest is starting college next year." He pulled out his phone, showing a family photo. "You? How's Margaret?" Harmon's expression tightened slightly. We divorced 10 years ago now, after I retired. Thompson's face fell. I'm sorry, Rich. I didn't know. No reason you should. We don't exactly keep in touch with Christmas cards. A moment of awkward silence fell between them, bridging the years of separation. Michael? Thompson asked finally, referring to Harmon's son. At this, Harmon's expression warmed slightly. Captain in the 2nd Armored Division, 3rd-generation tanker, stationed in Korea now. Pride crept into his voice despite his attempt at nonchalance. Michael had followed in his footsteps, against Harmon's initial wishes. He'd wanted his son to pursue a civilian career, something safer. But the Army was in the Harmon blood, had been since his grandfather served in Patton's 3rd Army in World War II. Like father, like son, Thompson said with approval. They entered the building, passing through multiple security checkpoints. The interior was surprisingly modern, state-of-the-art laboratories, engineering workshops, and computer centers. Staff in military uniforms and civilian attire moved purposefully through the halls, many stopping to stare curiously at the 2 older men. Colonel Westfield met them inside, directing them to a private conference room equipped with advanced communications and display systems. Sergeant Thompson, welcome to Project Lightning, she said, using the code name Harmon had only learned upon his arrival. Your credentials and security clearances have been processed. You'll have full access to all facilities. Thompson raised an eyebrow at this. As a retired non-commissioned officer, such high-level access was unusual. Captain Harmon has complete authority to structure his team as he sees fit, Westfield explained, noting his surprise. General Carter was most explicit about that. She handed Thompson a security badge and a tablet. This contains the basic briefing materials. Captain Harmon will fill in the details. If you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for Sergeant Mendez's arrival. After she left, Thompson examined the tablet, skimming through the initial briefing documents. His expression grew increasingly somber. An electromagnetic railgun on a tank chassis? That's supposed to be impossible, Harmon finished for him. Yet here we are, and they want us to develop a countermeasure. Rich, I'm flattered, but I've been out of the game for a long time. I fix industrial machinery these days, not state-of-the-art weapon systems. Harmon leaned forward. It's not about the technology, Bill. It's about the experience, about knowing what works in real-world conditions, not just in some engineer's simulation, about understanding that when shells are flying and your adrenaline is pumping and you're trying to keep your crew alive, the perfect solution isn't worth a damn if it's too complicated to use. He tapped the tablet's screen. These people are brilliant, the best minds in defense engineering, but most of them have never been in combat. Never felt their tank rock from a near miss. Never had to acquire a target through smoke and dust while taking fire. That's what we bring to the table. Reality. Thompson considered this, then nodded slowly. So we're the reality check. The ones who say, that looks great on paper, but will it work when you're knee-deep in hell? Exactly. Harmon paused. Plus one other thing, something not in the briefing materials. He lowered his voice, though the room was secure. We've intercepted communications suggesting the Dragon Project involves some technology that predates their current research program. Technology that might have been developed decades ago, then shelved for some reason. Cold War-era stuff? Soviet? Possibly. Or something else entirely. Part of our mission is to figure out what they're drawing from, to see if we can get ahead of their development curve. Thompson whistled softly. Sounds like we're playing catch-up. For now, Harmon agreed, but that's going to change. They spent the next hours reviewing the technical data on the Dragon, Thompson asking sharp questions that belied his claim of being out of the game. Once a tanker, always a tanker, Harmon thought with satisfaction. The man still had the mind for it. By afternoon, Carlos Mendez had arrived, shorter and stockier than Thompson, with a shaved head and a neatly trimmed goatee that had gone completely white. His handshake was crushing, his embrace enthusiastic. Captain, Sergeant, Madre de Dios, look at you old men. His booming laugh filled the conference room. And here I thought I was the only one who got old. Mendez had been their driver, a wizard who could make the 70-ton Abrams perform like a vehicle half its size. He'd navigated minefields, ditches, and the chaotic terrain of the Iraqi desert with equal skill, always keeping the tank's thickest armor facing the enemy, always finding the best firing position for Thompson's deadly gunnery. Still working with engines, Carlos? Harmon asked after the initial greetings. Racing, Mendez confirmed with a grin. NASCAR mostly. Consultant for 3 teams. Turns out the skills translate pretty well. Harmon wasn't surprised. Mendez had always been a gearhead, constantly tinkering with the Abrams' turbine engine, coaxing more performance out of it than the designers had thought possible. As the day progressed, they fell back into their old patterns of interaction. Thompson's quiet precision, Mendez's exuberant energy, Harmon's steady leadership holding them together. It was as if the intervening years had compressed into nothing, as if they'd never left the confines of their tank. Robert Mitchell arrived shortly after sunset, the desert sky painted in spectacular hues of orange and purple. Tallest of the group, still lean and fit despite his 65 years, his handshake was firm, his smile genuine, but reserved. He'd been their loader, responsible for the critical task of selecting and loading the appropriate ammunition for each target. In the heat of battle, his speed and accuracy had been the difference between life and death. "Doc," Harmon greeted him using the old nickname. "Captain," Mitchell replied, then corrected himself. "Rich, been a long time." "Too long. How's civilian life treating you?" A slight smile. "Differently than these two, I imagine. I went to medical school after I got out. Orthopedic surgeon now, fixing bodies instead of loading shells." This was news to Harmon. He knew Mitchell had been intelligent. All of them had been. You didn't get selected for an elite tank crew otherwise. But he hadn't known about his post-Army career. "From tank rounds to surgical rounds," Thompson quipped. "Quite a transition." "Not as different as you might think," Mitchell said. "Both require precision under pressure. Both have life or death consequences." They gathered in the conference room, now fully assembled for the first time in 3.5 decades. Steel Thunder, reunited. Harmon felt an emotion he couldn't quite name, not quite nostalgia, not quite pride, but something that contained elements of both, mixed with a deep appreciation for the men who'd shared those pivotal moments of his life. "Before we go any further," he said, looking at each of them in turn, "I want to make sure you all understand what we're getting into. This isn't a reunion tour. This is deadly serious work with national security implications. Once you're fully briefed, there's no walking away. The classification level alone means you'll be under surveillance for the rest of your lives." He paused, letting that sink in. "If anyone wants to back out, now's the time. No hard feelings. You've all served your country honorably already." Thompson spoke first. "I'm in, all the way." "Me too, Captain," Mendez said without hesitation. "Like old times, eh?" Mitchell took longer to respond, his surgeon's eyes studying Harmon's face. "You think it's that important? Worth disrupting our lives at this age?" Harmon nodded gravely. "I wouldn't have called if it wasn't." "Then I'm in too," Mitchell said simply. "Steel Thunder rides again." With that settled, Harmon began the full briefing, going beyond what was in their initial materials. He explained about the Dragon tank, its electromagnetic railgun, its advanced armor and targeting systems. He showed them the satellite imagery, the intelligence assessments, the projected timeline for deployment. "If they field this thing in significant numbers," he concluded, "our current armored forces will be outclassed. Badly. The Abrams is a great tank, but against this, it would be like sending cavalry against machine guns." "So we develop a counter," Thompson said, his tactical mind already working the problem. "A new tank that can match or exceed the Dragon's capabilities." "Not just match," Harmon corrected. "Exceed significantly. We need to leapfrog them, not just catch up." "The electromagnetic railgun is the key," Mitchell observed. "That's what gives it the edge in firepower. But the power requirements must be enormous. How are they supplying enough energy?" "That's one of the key questions we need to answer," Harmon said. "Our engineers have theories, but nothing concrete yet." Mendez, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "You said there might be Cold War connections? Old technology repurposed?" Harmon nodded. "There are indications, yes. Which brings me to our first task." He inserted the encrypted flash drive Colonel Westfield had given him into a secure terminal. After authenticating with his fingerprint, a series of documents appeared on the room's main display screen. "These just came in. Intelligence has identified a project code name that keeps appearing in communications related to the Dragon, something called Thunderbolt." The screen showed intercepted message fragments, most in a foreign language with English translations provided. The word Thunderbolt appeared repeatedly, always in an operational context. "What's interesting," Harmon continued, "is that our own historical records show a Project Thunderbolt from the late 1970s and early 1980s, a classified Army research initiative focused on advanced electromagnetic weapon systems for armored vehicles." His three teammates exchanged looks of surprise. We were working on this 40 years ago? Thompson asked incredulously. Apparently. But the project was shelved in 1983. Budget cuts after the Cold War wound down. The records are incomplete. A lot of it is still highly classified. But what we do know is that the theoretical groundwork was laid, even if the technology of the time couldn't support actual development. And now our adversaries have picked up where we left off, Mitchell said softly, using our own abandoned research against us. That's the theory we're working with, Harmon confirmed, which means we need to recover everything we can about Project Thunderbolt. If they're building on that foundation, we need to understand it completely ourselves. Where do we start? Thompson asked. Archives, Harmon replied. Military research archives at Fort Belvoir. Most of the paper records from that era are stored there. Colonel Westfield has arranged for us to have access tomorrow. Paper records? Mendez grinned. How retro. Sometimes old school is the best school, Harmon said, especially when you don't want a digital trail. The meeting continued late into the night, the four veterans quickly reestablishing their old working rhythm. Thompson analyzed the tactical implications. Mitchell focused on the technical specifications. Mendez delved into the propulsion and power generation aspects. And Harmon, as always, synthesized their insights into an overall strategic approach. By midnight, they had the beginnings of a plan. Step 1, recover the original Project Thunderbolt research. Step 2, assemble a technical team that could translate that theoretical work into practical applications. Step 3, develop a prototype that could match and exceed the Dragon's capabilities. As they prepared to retire to their quarters, exhausted but energized by the day's developments, Colonel Westfield returned with one last piece of information. Captain Harmon, the technical specialist, will be arriving tomorrow afternoon. 2 in particular I thought you should know about in advance. She handed him 2 personnel files. Major Lisa Hawkins, our AI and electronic warfare expert, and Captain James Chen, electromagnetic systems engineer. Both have been briefed on the basics, but not the full scope of the project. Harmon scanned their files quickly. Impressive credentials, though as he'd expected, limited combat experience. Hawkins had done a tour in Afghanistan, but in a support role. Chen was pure research and development, never deployed. They'll bring the technical expertise, Westfield continued. You and your team provide the real-world perspective. General Carter believes that combination is our best hope. After she left, Harmon shared the files with his teammates. Looks like we're getting the new blood tomorrow, young enough to be our children. Grandchildren, in my case, Thompson said with a wry smile. That Chen kid was born the year we were in Desert Storm. Makes you feel old, doesn't it? Mendez laughed. But hey, we've got something they don't. Experience, scars, stories worth telling. Mitchell, ever the most reflective of the group, shook his head slightly. Let's hope they never get the kind of experience we had. That's the whole point of what we're doing, isn't it? Building something so our kids and grandkids don't have to go through what we did. Harmon nodded, a familiar heaviness settling in his chest. The faces of men he'd lost in combat flashed through his mind, not just in Desert Storm, but in all the deployments that followed. Each one a failure in his mind, no matter what the citations and medals said. Each one a life he hadn't managed to protect. That's always the point, Doc, he said quietly. Always. That night, alone in his quarters, Harmon studied the intelligence reports more carefully. Something about the Dragon Project nagged at him, a connection he couldn't quite make. Project Thunderbolt. Why did that name sound vaguely familiar, beyond the obvious mythological reference? He was about to give up and try to sleep when his secure phone rang. Few people had this number, basically just General Carter and Colonel Westfield. Harmon, he answered. Dad, it's Michael. Harmon sat up straight, instantly alert. His son never called on this line. Michael, how did you get this number? General Carter gave it to me. Said it was important I reach you securely. Something in his son's voice sent a chill down Harmon's spine. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly, but something strange happened today. We're on joint exercises with the Korean military, supposed to be routine training. And one of their intelligence officers approached me privately, asked if I was related to Captain Richard Harmon from Desert Storm. When I said yes, he handed me a flash drive, said it contained information about something called Project Thunderbolt that you needed to see. Harmon's blood ran cold. Did you look at it? No, General Carter had already briefed me that you were working on a classified project. Said to contact you immediately if anything unusual happened. Good. Where are you now? Secure Communications Center at Camp Humphreys. The flash drive is in a locked container. Harmon's mind raced. This couldn't be a coincidence. Someone knew he was investigating Project Thunderbolt, knew about his son in Korea, and was using that connection to pass information. Michael, listen carefully. Don't give that drive to anyone except General Carter's direct representative. They'll be contacting you within the next few hours. Understand? Yes, sir. Michael's voice was steady, professional. Dad, is this as serious as I think it is? Harmon hesitated. His son was a soldier, a tank commander like himself, but he was also his son, the one part of his life that had remained untainted by the failures that haunted him. It might be, son, but that's all I can say right now. Understood. I'll wait for the general's representative. After the call ended, Harmon immediately contacted General Carter, relating the strange development. Carter sounded deeply troubled. This suggests they know about Project Lightning, he said. Know enough to target your son as a potential back channel. I don't like it, Rich, not one bit. Could be an attempt to introduce false information, Harmon suggested. Or malware into our systems. Could be, or it could be legitimate intelligence from a source who can't use official channels. Either way, we need to get that drive and analyze it under controlled conditions. What about Michael? If they've identified him as my son, already ahead of you, I'm having him reassigned temporarily. Secure location, increased protection. He'll be safe. Harmon thanked him, but the knot in his stomach wouldn't ease. The Dragon Project, Project Thunderbolt, and now this mysterious contact through his son, the pieces were starting to form a disturbing pattern. Someone was playing a very sophisticated game, and they had just demonstrated that they could reach close to home. He spent the rest of the night reviewing everything they knew about the Dragon and Project Thunderbolt, searching for connections he might have missed. By dawn, his eyes were burning with fatigue, but his mind was sharp with purpose. Whatever game was being played, he intended to win it, for his country, for his team, and most importantly, for his son. The next generation of tankers who would ride into harm's way, trusting their lives to the machines he was helping to create. Steel Thunder had one more mission, perhaps their most important yet. Chapter 4, Secrets from the Past. The military archives at Fort Belvoir resembled a vast library more than a cutting-edge research facility. Row upon row of shelving stretched into the distance, holding boxed files, microfilm reels, and other physical records deemed too sensitive or too old for digital storage. The air smelled of paper and metal, with a faint undertone of preservative chemicals. Harmon and Thompson had flown to Virginia that morning, leaving Mendez and Mitchell to prepare for the arrival of the technical specialists. As they followed their escort through the stacks, Harmon couldn't help but reflect on the irony. They were searching for information about futuristic weapons systems in what amounted to a technological time capsule. Section 47G, their escort announced, stopping before a row of industrial shelving. Project Thunderbolt materials are stored here. As requested, we've pulled everything with that designation from the 1975 to 1985 period. You'll need to sign for them. After completing the necessary paperwork, they were left alone with several boxes of files. Each bore classification markings that would have been intimidating even at the height of their military careers. Where do we start? Thompson asked, eyeing the stack of boxes. Chronologically, Harmon decided. Let's see how this thing evolved. They settled at a nearby table and began methodically working through the files. Project Thunderbolt, it turned out, had been initiated in 1976 as a response to intelligence, suggesting Soviet advances in electromagnetic weapons technology, initially focused on defense applications, ways to protect American tanks from potential EM attacks. It had gradually shifted toward offensive capabilities. Look at this, Thompson said after an hour of reading, sliding a document across the table. November 1979. Proposal for an electromagnetic acceleration cannon for armored combat vehicles. They were conceptualizing a railgun for tanks over 40 years ago. Harmon examined the document. The technical specifications were ambitious even by today's standards. A weapon capable of accelerating a kinetic penetrator to velocities that would make conventional armor useless. But they ran into the same problem we've always had, he noted, flipping to the next page. Power generation. You'd need a small nuclear reactor to supply the energy required. They continued through the files, tracing the project's development. By 1981, actual prototypes of electromagnetic components had been constructed and tested. Small scale, but promising. By 1982, plans were underway for a full-scale demonstration using a modified M60 tank chassis. And then, abruptly, everything stopped. A terse memorandum dated March 1983 announced the indefinite suspension of Project Thunderbolt due to budgetary considerations and technological limitations. The signature at the bottom belonged to a three-star general Harmon had never heard of. Convenient timing, Thompson observed. Right after Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars sucked up all the research dollars. Maybe, Harmon agreed. But look at this. He'd found a document dated 2 weeks after the suspension order, a security directive requiring all Thunderbolt personnel to undergo additional counterintelligence screening, and another dated a month later, ordering the complete compartmentalization of all Thunderbolt research, with different teams to be given access only to their specific areas of focus. That's not normal procedure for a canceled project, Thompson said, frowning. That's the kind of thing you do when you're worried about espionage. Exactly. Harmon felt a chill that had nothing to do with the archive's climate control. What if Thunderbolt wasn't really canceled? What if it just went deeper black? They exchanged a look heavy with implication. If the project had continued in absolute secrecy, outside the normal chain of command and documentation, it might explain how their current adversaries had obtained the technology. Not through their own research, but through espionage targeting a program so classified that few in the U.S. government even knew it existed. Before they could discuss this further, Harmon's secure phone vibrated. A text message from General Carter. Call immediately. Stepping outside to a secure area, Harmon made the call. Carter answered on the first ring. We've analyzed the drive from your son, he said without preamble. It's genuine, Rich. Contains technical specifications for the Dragon's electromagnetic system that match perfectly with what we've observed. Plus something else, internal memos suggesting their research is based on stolen American technology from the 1980s. Project Thunderbolt, Harmon said. Not a question. You found something? Evidence suggesting the project might have continued in extreme secrecy after its official cancellation, possibly compromised by espionage. A heavy silence on the other end of the line. That would explain a lot, including why our adversary's development timeline is so accelerated. They're not inventing, they're implementing, using research we already completed. Is Michael safe? Harmon asked, shifting to his more personal concern. He's been temporarily reassigned to a security detail at the Pentagon. Officially, it's a routine rotation. Unofficially, I want him where we can keep an eye on him. Thank you, Max. Harmon felt a weight lift from his shoulders. What about the Korean intelligence officer who passed him the drive? Disappeared. We're working with Korean authorities, but so far nothing. Could be a genuine defector, could be something more complicated. After the call ended, Harmon rejoined Thompson and explained the situation. Together, they redoubled their efforts, searching the archives with renewed purpose. If Project Thunderbolt had indeed continued in the shadows, there might be traces, requisition orders, personnel transfers, budget allocations disguised as something else. By late afternoon, they had assembled a disturbing picture. Following the official cancellation, several key Thunderbolt scientists had been transferred to various special projects throughout the military research establishment. Equipment purchases had continued under different program designations. A testing facility in the Nevada desert, not far from their current base of operations, had been activated under the cover of conventional weapons trials. It didn't end, Thompson said, staring at their collection of evidence. It just fragmented, dispersed to avoid attention. And somewhere along the line, security was compromised, Harmon added grimly. The question is when, and by whom. They were interrupted by another call, this time from Colonel Westfield. Captain Harmon, she said, her voice tense. There's been a development at the Nevada facility, a security breach. Harmon straightened, instantly alert. What kind of breach? Electronic. Someone attempted to access our secure servers from the outside. The attack was sophisticated, would have succeeded if our security protocols weren't at the highest level. Any idea who? Not yet, but it happened shortly after Major Hawkins and Captain Chen arrived. Could be coincidence. Or not, Harmon finished for her. We're on our way back. Maximum security measures until we arrive. After ending the call, he turned to Thompson. We need to get back to Nevada now. What about this? Thompson gestured to the archival materials. We've got enough to confirm our suspicions. Have everything copied and secured for transport. As they prepared to leave, Harmon felt a familiar tension building in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced before combat, that hyper-awareness, that clarity of purpose that came with imminent danger. Project Thunderbolt had been compromised decades ago. Now history seemed poised to repeat itself with Project Lightning. But this time, Harmon was determined to prevent it. On the flight back to Nevada, he reviewed everything they'd learned. Project Thunderbolt had been revolutionary for its time, perhaps too revolutionary. Someone had recognized its value and taken extraordinary measures to obtain the technology. Now, 40 years later, that stolen research had borne fruit in the form of the Dragon tank. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were essentially in a race to rediscover and implement technology that had been American in the first place. As the plane began its descent toward the private airstrip serving the Nevada facility, Harmon gazed out at the desert landscape below, so similar to Iraq, to the battlefield where Steel Thunder had earned its reputation. He thought of his son, now safely ensconced at the Pentagon. Michael had followed in his footsteps despite Harmon's initial reluctance. He'd wanted something different for his boy, something safer, less burdened with the weight of life and death decisions. But Michael had the Harmon stubbornness. The family calling to serve had proven too strong to resist. Now that service had placed him in potential danger, because of who his father was, because of secrets buried for decades. The plane touched down smoothly on the desert runway. As they taxied toward the terminal, Harmon could see Colonel Westfield waiting, along with Mendez and Mitchell. Their expressions were grave. Something had happened, something beyond the attempted electronic intrusion. Harmon gathered his materials, steeling himself for whatever awaited them. One thought dominated his mind as they prepared to disembark. The enemy wasn't just the Dragon tank and its creators, it was time itself, the decades of lost research, the institutional amnesia that had allowed their own technological advantage to slip through their fingers. And now they were in a desperate race to reclaim what had once been theirs. A race that, if lost, might fundamentally alter the balance of global power for generations to come. The Nevada sun cast long shadows across the testing grounds as Harmon stood watching the team of engineers swarming over the prototype. Just 2 weeks into the project, and already the secure facility had transformed into a hive of activity. Massive equipment had been shipped in, portable labs erected, and a team of nearly 100 specialists assembled. All for one purpose, to create a weapon that could counter the Dragon. "We're ready for the first power test," Major Lisa Hawkins announced, approaching with a tablet in hand. At 45, she was relatively young compared to Harmon's team, but her credentials were impeccable. 20 years in military intelligence, specializing in electronic warfare and artificial intelligence systems. Her close-cropped hair and rimless glasses gave her a severe appearance that matched her no-nonsense approach. "What's your assessment?" Harmon asked, noting the slight tension in her expression. "Theoretically, it should work," she replied. "The electromagnetic coils have been fabricated according to both the original Thunderbolt specifications and our updated designs. The power delivery system is ready for a low-voltage test." They walked together toward the main testing bay, a converted aircraft hangar with reinforced walls and a sophisticated array of sensors and monitoring equipment. Inside, Thompson and Captain James Chen were making final adjustments to what looked like a massive rifle barrel mounted on a testing platform. "Morning, Captain," Thompson greeted. Despite the formality of his words, his expression was animated with an excitement Harmon hadn't seen since their days in Desert Storm. The former gunner had taken to the electromagnetic technology with unexpected enthusiasm, spending hours with Chen discussing velocity calculations and penetration theories. Chen, the electromagnetic systems specialist, looked up briefly from his work. Only 35, he was a prodigy who'd been recruited directly from DARPA. His slender build and thoughtful demeanor masked a brilliant mind that could intuitively grasp complex electromagnetic principles that left others baffled. "We're going with 30% power for this initial test," Chen explained, "just enough to validate the basic electromagnetic acceleration concept without risking damage to the components." Harmon nodded, scanning the room for Mendez and Mitchell. He spotted them at the far end of the hangar, huddled over the power distribution system that would ultimately be miniaturized to fit inside a tank chassis. "Everyone behind the safety line," Thompson announces, "powering up in 30 seconds. The team retreated to the observation area, protected by thick ballistic glass. Chen began the countdown, his fingers dancing across a control panel with practiced precision. Initializing electromagnetic field, power flow stable, commencing test in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There was no traditional explosion, no cloud of smoke or flame that would accompany a conventional cannon. Instead, a high-pitched whine built rapidly to a crescendo, followed by a sharp crack that felt more like a physical blow than a sound. A tungsten rod serving as the test projectile vanished from the loading chamber, leaving only a distortion in the air marking its passage. At the far end of the range, a standard armor plate that would have stopped most conventional tank rounds shattered like glass, the projectile continuing through it and embedding itself 3 feet into the concrete backstop. For a moment, silence filled the hangar. Then Mendez let out a low whistle. Moderated Dios, he murmured, at only 30% power. Chen was already analyzing the data streaming to his tablet. Muzzle velocity exceeded projections by 12%. We achieved just over Mach 7. How does that compare to conventional tank rounds, Harmon asked. A standard Abrams APFSDS round travels at about Mach 5, Thompson answered before Chen could. This is already faster, with only a fraction of the power we'll eventually use. And the Dragon, Harmon pressed. Based on the intelligence estimates, Hawkins interjected, they're achieving velocities approaching Mach 9. But with the refinements we're planning to the coil design and power delivery, we should be able to match or exceed that. Harmon nodded, feeling a cautious optimism. The technology worked. Now came the real challenge, turning an experimental device into a practical weapons system that could be mounted on a tank chassis. Good work, everyone, he said. Chen, Thompson, I want a complete analysis of the test data. Hawkins, coordinate with the materials team on the barrel erosion issue. Mendez, Mitchell, let's talk about the power requirements. As the team dispersed to their assignments, Harmon remained for a moment, staring at the shattered armor plate. The technological race was underway, but technology alone wouldn't win this battle. He thought back to his days commanding Steel Thunder and Desert Storm. What had made them effective wasn't just the advanced technology of the Abrams. It was the human element. The coordination, the intuition, the bond between crew members that allowed them to function as a single organism. That was the element he needed to recreate here. Not just building a superior machine, but forging a team that could make that machine truly exceptional. Later that evening, in the secure conference room that had become their informal gathering place, Harmon brought his original team together. We need to talk about the larger picture, he began, spreading out schematics of their current design approach. The electromagnetic gun is just one component. We need to think holistically about how this system will actually perform in combat. You're worried about something specific, Mitchell observed, his surgeon's eyes missing nothing. Harmon nodded. The power requirements. Everything we're designing requires enormous electrical capacity. The Dragon has apparently solved this problem, but we're still working with theoretical solutions. Mendez leaned forward. I've been thinking about that. The Navy's electromagnetic railgun program uses massive capacitors to store and discharge energy rapidly. We could adapt a similar approach, but miniaturized. The weight would be prohibitive, Thompson countered. We'd sacrifice mobility. Not necessarily, Mendez replied, an unusual excitement in his voice. What if we took inspiration from hybrid vehicle technology? Multiple power sources working in concert. A conventional turbine engine for mobility and baseline systems, combined with advanced capacitors specifically for the weapon systems. Like having two separate hearts, Mitchell mused. One for living, one for fighting. Exactly, Mendez confirmed. I've been doing some calculations. If we use the latest energy storage technology NASA's been developing for the Mars missions, we could potentially create a system compact enough to fit within a reasonable weight allowance. Harmon studied the rough sketch Mendez was drawing. This isn't in any of the official Thunderbolt documentation. Where did you get this idea? A slight smile crossed Mendez's face. Remember when I said I've been consulting for NASCAR teams? That wasn't the whole truth. I've also been doing some work for a private space company, energy storage for launch vehicles. Some of the same principles apply. Harmon felt a flicker of unease. You didn't mention this during your security clearance review. It was classified commercial technology, Mendez replied. Didn't seem relevant to tank design at the time. But now, the conversation paused as the door opened and Colonel Westfield entered. Gentlemen, there's been a development. The flash drive recovered from Captain Harmon's son in Korea has yielded additional information. She placed a folder on the table. Our cryptanalysis team has decrypted another layer of data. It contains what appears to be technical specifications for the Dragon's power system. Harmon opened the folder, finding detailed schematics of what looked like a hybrid power plant, remarkably similar to what Mendez had just been describing. This can't be a coincidence, Thompson said, looking from the drawings to Mendez. How did you know about this approach? Mendez's expression darkened. I didn't, at least not directly, but the principles are sound engineering. Anyone working on high-energy weapon systems would eventually arrive at a similar solution. Harmon studied his old friend's face, looking for signs of deception. They'd served together, trusted each other with their lives. But in this world of classified technology and international espionage, old loyalties could sometimes be compromised. We should continue this discussion tomorrow, he said finally. Everyone take some time to review these new specifications. We'll reconvene at 0800. As the others filed out, Harmon held Mendez back. Carlos, I need to know if there's anything else you haven't told me. Anything that might be relevant to this project. Mendez met his gaze steadily. Rich, you know me. We've been through hell together. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in what we're doing. That's not an answer, Harmon pressed. No, it's not, Mendez agreed. But it's all I can give you right now. You're going to have to trust me a little longer. With that cryptic response, he departed, leaving Harmon alone with his thoughts and the disturbing parallels between Mendez's ideas and the enemy's technology. Chapter 6. Past and Present. The call came at 3 in the morning, pulling Harmon from a fitful sleep filled with dreams of burning tanks and electromagnetic pulses. Colonel Westfield's voice was tense, controlled, but with an undercurrent of urgency that immediately brought him to full alertness. There's been an incident at Camp Humphreys. Your son's been injured. The words hit him like physical blows. How bad? Stable condition. But it wasn't an accident. His quarters were targeted by a small explosive device. Low yield, apparently meant as a warning rather than an assassination attempt. I'm on my way, Harmon said, already reaching for his clothes. A transport is being prepared, Westfield confirmed. General Carter has authorized your temporary leave. You depart in 1 hour. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of military transports and secure facilities. By midnight the following day, Harmon found himself in a private room at the Camp Humphreys Medical Center, watching his son sleep. Michael looked peaceful despite the bandages covering the right side of his face and arm. The doctors had assured Harmon that the injuries were superficial, that there would be no permanent damage. But the message behind the attack was clear. Someone was sending a warning. As Harmon sat vigil, his mind drifted back 35 years to another hospital room, another injured soldier. Private James Reynolds had been Steel Thunder's loader before Mitchell, a 19-year-old from Oklahoma with quick hands and a quicker smile. During a night operation in the early days of Desert Storm, Reynolds had been partially exposed when their tank took indirect fire. He'd survived the initial blast but died 3 days later from his injuries. Harmon had sat with him through those final hours, listening to Reynolds' increasingly delirious talk about the girl back home, the farm he'd never see again, the future that was evaporating with each labored breath. He'd made promises he couldn't keep, about getting Reynolds home, about writing to his family, about making sure his sacrifice meant something. In the end, all he could do was hold the boy's hand as he slipped away. That failure had haunted Harmon for decades. The first, but not the last, when he couldn't protect. It had hardened something inside him, created a determination bordering on obsession to never lose another soldier under his command. When Michael had announced his intention to join the army, to follow in his father's footsteps, Harmon had initially opposed the idea. He'd seen too much, lost too many. The thought of his son facing those same dangers was unbearable. But Michael had inherited his father's stubborn determination. He'd enlisted anyway, excelled in training, and eventually earned his commission. When he'd chosen armor as his branch, Harmon had recognized it as both a tribute and a challenge. Michael was his own man, walking a similar path, but determined to forge his own legacy. Now, watching his son's chest rise and fall in the sterile hospital room, Harmon felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him. This attack hadn't been random. It was connected to the Thunderbolt project, to the mysterious flash drive, to the technology race that seemed to be accelerating beyond anyone's control. His son had been targeted because of him. Michael stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, he seemed disoriented. Then his gaze focused on his father. "Dad," he said, his voice rough, "didn't expect to see you here." "Pulled some strings," Harmon replied, moving closer. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got too close to a firecracker." Michael attempted a smile, wincing as it pulled at the bandages on his face. "Doctor says I'll live." "Do you remember what happened?" Michael's expression sobered. "I was asleep. There was a sound at the window, then a flash. Not a big explosion, almost felt deliberate, like they didn't want to kill me, just make a point. Harmon nodded. That aligned with Westfield's assessment. Any idea who? Security found footprints outside. Military-issue boots, but not American pattern. That's all I know. He hesitated. This is connected to that flash drive, isn't it? To whatever you're working on. I think so, Harmon admitted, which means you're being moved to a secure location until we sort this out. Michael started to protest, then seemed to think better of it. Is it important, what you're doing? Yes, Harmon said simply. It could change the balance of power, make a real difference in future conflicts. Michael studied his father's face. I used to think you were invincible, you know. When I was a kid, Captain Harmon, hero of Desert Storm. The stories your old crew would tell when they visited. Thompson making you sound like some tank warfare Jedi. Harmon smiled faintly. Thompson always did have a gift for exaggeration. That's what I thought too until I got my own command. Until I led men into dangerous situations and had to make the same kinds of calls. Michael's eyes, so like his mother's, held a new understanding. It wasn't exaggeration, was it? You really did those things, made those decisions, lived with the consequences. We all did, Harmon replied. That's what it means to command. To be responsible not just for the mission, but for the lives in your charge. Is that why you didn't want me to join up? Because you knew how hard it would be? Harmon considered his answer carefully. Partly, but mostly because I knew what it might cost you, what it might take from you. Like it took from you and Mom, Michael said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement of old wounds that had never fully healed. Margaret had finally left after Harmon's third deployment, unable to continue competing with the Army for her husband's commitment. She'd never asked him to choose, had never issued an ultimatum. She'd simply reached her limit. Your mother was stronger than anyone I've ever known, Harmon said. She supported me through things that would have broken most people. In the end, I just asked for more than anyone should have to give. Michael nodded, accepting this rare glimpse into his parents' past. So this project, it must be pretty important for them to pull you out of retirement. It is, Harmon confirmed. But so are you. I've arranged for you to be transferred to Walter Reed once you're stabilized for travel. General Carter has some ideas about your next assignment. Dad, I don't need special treatment. I can still do my job here. This isn't special treatment, Harmon corrected him. It's protective custody disguised as a routine transfer. Someone targeted you to send a message to me. I'm not giving them a second chance. Before Michael could respond, a soft knock at the door announced the arrival of a Korean officer in dress uniform. He bowed slightly to Harmon before addressing them both. Captain Harmon, he said with a slight smile at the repetition. I am Colonel Park Jin-soo, Korean Military Intelligence. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, Harmon replied, rising to shake the man's hand. We appreciate Korea's assistance in this matter. It is our honor to help an ally, Park said smoothly, especially in a matter of such sensitivity. Something in his tone caused Harmon to study the Korean officer more carefully. You have information about the attack? Park glanced at the door, then back at Harmon. Not about the attack directly, but about its context. May we speak privately? Michael made a dismissive gesture. Don't mind me. I'll just lie here and focus on not pulling my stitches. Park seemed hesitant, but eventually nodded. Very well. What I have to tell you concerns the intelligence source who provided the flash drive with information about the Dragon tank. The officer who approached my son, Harmon confirmed. Yes, he was found yesterday in the Han River. Park's expression remained neutral, but his meaning was clear. Dead? Harmon asked, though he already knew the answer. Suicide, according to the official report. But there were inconsistencies. My department has been investigating discreetly. What's your unofficial assessment? Park lowered his voice further. The man was Colonel Sung Min Ho, a senior liaison with our Technical Intelligence Division. He had access to sensitive information provided by our allies, including the United States. 3 weeks ago, he began acting unusually, canceling meetings, working unusual hours. Then he approached your son with the flash drive. And now he's dead, Michael interjected from the bed. Yes, Park acknowledged. But before his death, he sent a secured message to a classified server. It was encrypted, but our analysts have partially decoded it. It contained one phrase that will be of interest to you. Thunderbolt was not canceled, it was stolen. Harmon felt a chill run through him. He knew about Project Thunderbolt. Apparently, the message also referred to something called the Nevada Compromise and indicated that the original security breach occurred in 1984. in recent years as previously suspected. That's a year after Thunderbolt was officially canceled, Harmon noted, which means the project did continue in secret, just as we suspected. Park nodded. Colonel Sung's message suggested that the original technology was compromised by someone inside the American program, someone who has remained undetected all these years. A mole, Harmon said, the implications spinning through his mind. Someone who could still be active today. That would be my assessment, Park agreed, which may explain both the attack on your son and Colonel Sung's untimely death. Someone is working very hard to protect old secrets. Michael sat up straighter in the bed, wincing slightly at the movement. That's why they targeted me. Not just to warn you off, but because they thought I might have additional information from Colonel Sung. Did you? Harmon asked. No, he just handed me the drive and said it was for you, that it concerned Thunderbolt. That was the entire interaction. Park checked his watch. I must return to my duties. A security detail will remain outside this room until Captain Harmon is transported. You have my personal assurance that we take this matter very seriously. After the Korean officer departed, father and son sat in silence for several minutes, each processing the new information. There's a traitor, Michael finally said. Someone who sold out American technology decades ago and is still covering their tracks. So it seems, Harmon agreed, his mind already racing ahead to the implications for the current project. If there had been a mole in the original Thunderbolt program, there could be one in Project Lightning as well. Someone on his team, or adjacent to it, feeding information to the enemy. What are you going to do? Michael asked. Harmon rose, his decision already made. First, make sure you're safely transferred to Walter Reed, then get back to Nevada and find out who betrayed Thunderbolt before they can do the same to our project. Be careful, Dad, Michael said, an unusual note of concern in his voice. If they're willing to target me, they won't hesitate to come after you directly. Harmon smiled grimly. Let them try. I'm not the same man who sat in a hospital room 35 years ago, making promises I couldn't keep. This time, I'm ready for them. Chapter 7. Pressure and Betrayal. The Nevada facility felt different when Harmon returned. The initial enthusiasm had been replaced by a tense focus as various technical challenges emerged. More concerning was the subtle undercurrent of division that had developed between team members in his absence. We've hit a significant roadblock with the power system, Colonel Westfield briefed him as they walked through the main engineering lab. Major Hawkins and her team believe that an AI-controlled distribution network is the only viable approach for managing the energy requirements. But your veterans, particularly Sergeant Thompson, strongly oppose integrating such advanced automation. Where does Chen stand on this? Harmon asked, noting the engineer's absence from his usual workstation. He's been working independently on alternative approaches, Westfield replied, a note of disapproval in her voice. He feels caught between the two philosophical approaches. Harmon nodded, understanding the dynamic. His old crew favored human control, born from years of combat experience where technology sometimes failed at critical moments. Hawkins and the younger engineers placed their faith in the latest systems, believing that artificial intelligence could make faster, more optimal decisions than human operators. Both approaches had merit, both had weaknesses. Finding the right balance would be crucial. He found Thompson alone in the firing range, meticulously examining the latest prototype of the electromagnetic cannon. The tension in his old friend's shoulders told Harmon all he needed to know about the current state of affairs. That bad, huh? He said by way of greeting. Thompson looked up, his expression relaxing slightly. Rich, good to have you back. How's Michael? Recovering well, being transferred to Walter Reed as we speak. Harmon moved closer, examining the prototype. Westfield tells me there's been some disagreement about the control systems. That's putting it mildly, Thompson replied, setting down the calibration tool he'd been using. Hawkins wants to put an AI in charge of the entire weapon system. Let it handle target acquisition, power allocation, even firing decisions. And you disagree? Damn right I do. I've looked into her eyes, Rich. She's brilliant, no question about it. But she's never been in combat. Never had systems fail when lives depended on them. She thinks an algorithm can replace human judgment. What about the rest of the team? Harmon asked. Mendez is on the fence. He sees the technical advantages but shares our concerns about reliability. Mitchell leans toward traditional controls, but he's been focused on the medical aspects, crew survivability. And Chen? Thompson's expression darkened slightly. Chen's been keeping to himself lately, working odd hours. Sometimes I come in early and find evidence he's been running simulations all night. Harmon filed this information away, considering it alongside what he'd learned in Korea. A mole in the original Thunderbolt project, the possibility of a current infiltration. Chen's behavior could be innocent, the natural work habits of a dedicated scientist, or it could be something more concerning. The first full system test is scheduled for tomorrow, Thompson continued. We've installed the prototype in the modified Abrams chassis. It's crude, but it should give us an indication of how the integrated system performs. Let's hope it goes better than the last time we tried something new, a familiar voice said from behind them. Harmon turned to see Mendez entering, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. Despite his jovial tone, the driver's eyes were serious. The secondary power systems are ready, but I'm not confident in the integration with the primary drive. We're pushing the tolerances beyond what they were designed for. Can we delay the test? Harmon asked. Mendez shook his head. General Carter is bringing a congressional delegation. Too late to reschedule. We'll just have to hope it holds together. The three veterans shared a look of understanding. They'd been in similar situations before, making do with imperfect equipment, hoping for the best while preparing for the worst. Where's Mitchell? Harmon asked. Medical center, Mendez replied. One of the technicians got burned when a coupling overheated. Nothing serious, but Mitchell's been looking after him. And Hawkins? Chen? Hawkins is in the control center, running final simulations. Chen? Mendez shrugged. Who knows? He comes and goes like a ghost these days. That evening, Harmon called the team together for a final briefing before the test. The conference room felt crowded with the addition of several technical specialists he hadn't met before, new arrivals during his absence. Tomorrow's demonstration is critical, he began without preamble, not just for the project's funding, but for its very existence. If we can show a viable prototype, even in crude form, we maintain momentum. If we fail, there will be questions about our approach, possibly even about continuing the program at all. He surveyed the faces around the table. Most showed determination, though fatigue was evident in the shadows under their eyes, the slight slump of their shoulders. They'd been pushing themselves hard in his absence. I know there have been disagreements about the control systems, he continued. After the test, we'll revisit those questions with fresh data. For now, we proceed with the hybrid approach. Manual control primary, AI assistance secondary. Hawkins frowned but nodded her acceptance. Thompson looked marginally more satisfied. One more thing, Harmon added. Security protocols are being enhanced, effective immediately. All work is compartmentalized. All communications monitored. All access to sensitive areas requires dual authentication. This announcement was met with murmurs of surprise and concern. What's happened? Mitchell asked, ever perceptive. Harmon chose his words carefully. We have reason to believe that sensitive information about this project may have been compromised. Until we can ensure operational security, these measures are necessary. He didn't mention the attack on Michael, the dead Korean intelligence officer, or the possibility of a long-dormant mole suddenly active again. Those details were restricted to the highest clearance levels. Get some rest, he concluded. Tomorrow will test all of us. Dismissed. As the team filed out, Harmon noticed Chen lingering behind, apparently engrossed in something on his tablet. When they were alone, the young engineer looked up. Captain Harmon, may I speak with you privately? Harmon studied the younger man. Chen appeared nervous, his normal composure fractured by whatever was weighing on his mind. Of course, he replied, closing the conference room door. What's on your mind, Captain Chen? I've been conducting independent analyses of the system integration, Chen began, his voice low. There are anomalies in the power management code, subtle variations that wouldn't be noticed during normal operation, but under stress conditions. Could cause a catastrophic failure, Harmon finished for him. When did you discover this? 3 days ago. I've been trying to trace the source. It's sophisticated, embedded deeply in the control architecture. Sabotage, Harmon said, the word hanging heavily between them. Chen nodded. I believe so. And implemented recently, not during initial development. Someone with high-level access. The implications were clear. Someone on their team, someone with intimate knowledge of the prototype systems, was working to ensure its failure. Why come to me with this, Harmon asked. Why not report it through official channels? Chen met his gaze steadily. Because I don't know who to trust. The code modifications required specific knowledge that only a few people possess, including me. You're concerned you might be suspected. Wouldn't you be? I'm the newest member of the core team. My background checks were expedited, and I've been working unusual hours, which I know has been noticed. Harmon considered this. Chen's behavior could certainly appear suspicious. Coming forward like this could be a genuine attempt to clear his name or a clever misdirection. Can you fix the code? He asked. Already have, Chen replied, sliding his tablet across the table. I've isolated the modified sections and restored them to their original state, but I haven't implemented the changes yet. I wanted your authorization first. Harmon examined the technical data displayed on the screen. His knowledge of programming was limited, but the before and after comparisons clearly showed subtle alterations in key system parameters. Make the corrections, and he decided, but keep this between us for now. If someone has compromised the project, I don't want to alert them that we're on to them. And tomorrow's test proceeds as planned, but I want you monitoring the systems directly. If anything looks wrong, anything at all, you abort immediately. Chen nodded, taking back the tablet. There's something else you should know. The code modifications. They bear a striking resemblance to techniques I've seen before. During my time at DARPA, we analyzed foreign military software that had been obtained through intelligence channels. The methodology is distinct, almost like a signature. You're saying you recognize who did this? Not who specifically, but what organization they likely work for. Chen hesitated. It matches patterns associated with the particular foreign military intelligence unit, the same one believed to be behind the Dragon tank development. This confirmed Harmon's worst fears. The enemy wasn't just developing competing technology. They were actively working to sabotage the American response. Thank you for bringing this to me, he said. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that integrity matters, even when it's difficult, even when it puts you at risk. After Chen departed, Harmon remained in the conference room, considering his next move. If there was a traitor on the team, they needed to be identified and neutralized. But accusing the wrong person could be equally destructive to the project. He thought of Michael lying in a hospital bed with injuries meant as a warning, of Colonel Sung, found floating in the Han River after trying to expose a decades-old betrayal, of Project Thunderbolt, its promising technology stolen and now turned against the country that had developed it. The path forward was fraught with danger. But Steel Thunder had never backed down from a fight, no matter the odds. Tomorrow would be a test in more ways than one. Chapter 8, Solutions from the Past. Dawn broke over the Nevada desert, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Harmon stood on the observation platform, watching as the modified Abrams tank was prepared for testing. Externally, it looked much like the standard model, except for the slightly elongated turret housing the electromagnetic cannon prototype. Inside, however, it had been radically transformed. The conventional main gun had been replaced with the experimental weapon. The power systems had been completely redesigned, incorporating Mendez's hybrid approach. Additional computer systems filled spaces normally reserved for ammunition storage, since this was a technology demonstrator rather than a combat-ready vehicle. Quite a sight, isn't she? Mendez said, joining him at the railing. Not pretty, but she's got potential. Will she work? Harmon asked bluntly. Mendez considered the question. The basic technology is sound. The integration, that's where I'm less confident. We're asking systems to work together that weren't designed for each other. Like our team, Harmon observed. A slight smile crossed Mendez's face. Exactly like our team, old school and new school, trying to find common ground. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the technical crews making final preparations. In the distance, a convoy of black SUVs approached, carrying General Carter and the congressional delegation. I need to ask you something, Carlos, Harmon said finally. Something I should have asked weeks ago. Mendez tensed slightly. About the power system designs, the similarities to the Dragon's approach. Yes, it's too close to be coincidence. No, it isn't, Mendez agreed. But the explanation isn't what you might be thinking. He checked his watch. We don't have time for the full story now. After the test, I promise. You'll understand everything. Before Harmon could press further, Colonel Westfield approached, her expression professionally neutral despite the tension of the day. General Carter's convoy has arrived, she reported. The congressional representatives are being briefed on security protocols. Test commencement in 45 minutes. Status of the prototype? Harmon asked. All systems nominal according to Major Hawkins. Captain Chen has completed his final checks of the electromagnetic systems. Sergeant Thompson is supervising the loading of the test projectiles. And Mitchell? In the medical standby unit, standard precaution for this type of demonstration. Harmon nodded. Everything was in place, except for the answers he needed about potential sabotage. about the possible traitor in their midst, about Mendez's mysterious knowledge of power systems that mirrored the enemy's design. The observation bunker filled gradually with officials in suits and uniforms. General Carter made his way directly to Harmon, greeting him with a firm handshake. "Rich, good to see you. How's Michael?" "Recovering well. Thank you for arranging his transfer." Carter nodded, then lowered his voice. "The Korean intelligence report reached me. Disturbing implications. We'll discuss it after the demonstration." The general turned to address the assembled dignitaries, providing a brief overview of the project's goals and the specific objectives of today's test. Harmon only half listened, his attention focused on the tank sitting on the test range and on the faces of his team members scattered throughout the bunker. Thompson, standing near the front, watching the range with the focused gaze of a professional gunner. Hawkins at the main control console, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard as she made final adjustments to the monitoring systems. Chen at a secondary station, ostensibly checking electromagnetic field readings, but Harmon suspected he was actually monitoring for any signs of the code anomalies he'd discovered and corrected. Mitchell by the medical equipment, prepared for an emergency he hoped wouldn't come, and Mendez, now seated at the power systems console, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. "Test commencing in 30 seconds, Westfield announced over the communication system. On the range, the modified Abrams engine roared to life, the distinctive turbine whine echoing across the desert. The turret rotated smoothly, aligning the experimental cannon with the target array 1,000 meters downrange. 20 seconds. Harmon felt the familiar tension that preceded combat, the heightened awareness, the slight increase in heart rate. This wasn't battle, but in many ways the stakes were just as high. 10 seconds. Thompson caught his eye across the room, giving a slight nod. The old gunner's confidence was reassuring. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, initiating test fire sequence. The tank sat motionless for a moment. Then several things happened in rapid succession. The barrel of the electromagnetic cannon glowed briefly with a blue phosphorescence. A sharp crack split the air. Downrange, the target, a specially designed composite meant to simulate the Dragon's advanced armor, disintegrated in a spectacular fashion. For a heartbeat, it seemed the test had been perfectly successful. Then alarms began blaring from multiple consoles. Red warning indicators flashed across the main display. "Power surge in the secondary systems," Hawkins reported, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Containment protocols activated. Electromagnetic field unstable," Chen added, his voice tight with concentration, attempting to compensate. On the range, the tank's turret had stopped moving. Smoke began to rise from the rear compartment where the power systems were housed. "Initiating emergency shutdown," Mendez announced, his hands moving with practiced precision across his controls. For a tense moment, nothing seemed to happen. The smoke continued to billow, growing darker and more ominous. Then gradually the warning indicators began to shift from red to yellow. "Power levels dropping," Hawkins confirmed. "Crisis protocols holding." "Field collapse controlled," Chen added. "No cascade failure detected." Harmon released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Around the bunker, similar sighs of relief could be heard from the technical staff. The congressional observers looked concerned but not panicked, following the lead of the professionals around them. "Emergency response team deployed," Westfield announced, gesturing toward the fire suppression vehicles already racing toward the tank. General Carter moved to stand beside Harmon. "Assessment?" he asked quietly. "Partial success," Harmon replied. "The weapon functioned as intended. The target was destroyed, but the power systems couldn't handle the load. We need to understand why." Carter nodded. "The delegation will want answers, clear, non-technical explanations. I'll have something for them within the hour, after my team has had a chance to analyze what happened." The general studied him for a moment. "You don't seem surprised by this outcome." "Let's just say I had concerns about system integration," Harmon replied carefully, not wanting to reveal his suspicions about sabotage without more concrete evidence. As the initial crisis response transitioned to a more methodical recovery operation, Harmon gathered his core team in a small conference room adjacent to the main bunker. "I need to know exactly what happened out there," he said without preamble. "Was this a technical failure or something else?" Chen spoke first. "The electromagnetic systems performed within expected parameters. The projectile velocity and accuracy matched our projections. The failure occurred in the power management systems after the shot." "The hybrid approach worked initially," Mendez added. "Primary and secondary systems balanced the load during the firing sequence. But then the integration protocols failed, causing the surge that nearly led to a catastrophic overload. Could this be related to the code anomalies you discovered? Harmon asked Chen directly. The young engineer glanced at the others, clearly uncomfortable with discussing this in the larger group. Possibly. The modifications I corrected were in similar systems, though not identical. What code anomalies? Hawkins demanded. I wasn't informed of any issues with my systems. They weren't in your primary control architecture, Chen explained. They were buried in the integration layers between systems, easy to miss unless you were specifically looking for them. And why were you looking? Thompson asked, his tone neutral, but his expression suspicious. Because I've seen similar patterns before, Chen replied. In compromised systems analyzed during my time at DARPA. A tense silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Hawkins looked shocked. Thompson's expression hardened. Mitchell remained outwardly calm, though his eyes darted between the others, assessing their reactions. Only Mendez seemed unsurprised. He sat back in his chair, a strange expression on his face, almost one of recognition. You think someone deliberately sabotaged the test, Thompson said finally. Someone with insider access. The evidence points in that direction, Harmon confirmed. But we don't have enough information yet to make accusations. What we need now is solutions. How do we fix this and move forward? The integration is the key, Mendez said, leaning forward. We're trying to force modern systems to work with an electromagnetic weapon concept that was designed decades ago. It's like trying to run modern software on vintage hardware. But the original Thunderbolt designs don't include the power management systems we need, Hawkins pointed out. We had to develop those from scratch. Not entirely from scratch, Mendez countered. We adapted concepts from other fields. Aerospace, racing, even naval systems. The problem is that we're thinking too conventionally, Mitchell interjected, speaking up for the first time. We're treating this as an engineering challenge when it's really a biological one. The others looked at him in confusion. Explain, Harmon prompted. In medicine, when we transplant an organ, the primary concern isn't the organ itself, but rejection. The body's defense mechanisms attack what they perceive as foreign. Mitchell gestured toward the tank, visible through the window. What we're seeing is a kind of technological rejection. The systems recognize each other as foreign and fail to integrate properly. So what's the solution? Harmon asked. In medical terms, in transplantation, we use anti-rejection drugs that suppress the immune response. The technological equivalent would be a completely new integration layer. Not trying to force the old and new to work together, but creating a buffer between them that translates their operations. Chen's eyes widened. Like a biological interface between artificial systems. It's unorthodox, but it might work. It would mean a complete redesign of the control architecture, Hawkins pointed out. We'd be starting over in many ways. Not starting over, Mendez said slowly. Going back to basics, to the original concept that Thunderbolt was built on. He turned to Harmon. Remember I promised to explain about the power systems? About how I knew approaches similar to the Dragon's design? This is where it gets complicated, and where the past might give us the solution we need. Mendez rose, moving to a secure terminal in the corner of the room. After entering his authentication codes, he accessed a section of the project database that Harmon hadn't seen before. When I said I'd been consulting for NASCAR and aerospace companies, that wasn't entirely accurate. For the past 15 years, I've been part of a black program within NASA, working on advanced propulsion systems for deep space missions. He brought up technical schematics that looked vaguely familiar. These designs bear a striking resemblance to elements of the original Thunderbolt project, not because they were stolen or leaked, but because they evolved from the same source. I don't understand, Thompson said. After Thunderbolt was officially canceled in 1983, some of the research was repurposed. The pure weapons applications were shelved, but the fundamental work on electromagnetic field generation and control found new homes in other projects, including NASA's Deep Space Initiative. Harmon leaned forward, studying the schematics more carefully. You're saying NASA has been developing technology derived from Thunderbolt for all these years, without any connection to the military applications? Exactly, Mendez confirmed. Different purpose, different application, but the same underlying principles. And because it wasn't classified as weapons research, it evolved more rapidly, without the security constraints that might have limited military development. And you've been part of this, Harmon said, understanding dawning. That's how you knew approaches similar to what we're seeing in the Dragon. Not because you're connected to foreign intelligence, but because you've been working on the American civilian version of the same technology. Mendez nodded. I couldn't tell you earlier because the NASA program has its own security classifications. It took General Carter's intervention to get the cross-program authorization I needed. So the solution to our integration problem might lie in the work you've been doing for NASA, Mitchell asked. I believe so, Mendez replied. The space program faced similar challenges integrating electromagnetic systems with conventional power sources. They developed what they call a neural network interface, a flexible learning system that adapts to changing conditions rather than trying to rigidly control them. Like the human nervous system, Mitchell observed. Exactly, it doesn't try to force the different systems to speak the same language. It learns to translate between them, in real time, adapting as conditions change. Hawkins looked skeptical. That's an entirely different approach than what we've been pursuing. Yes, Mendez agreed, but it might be the only one that can work in the time frame we have. The enemy already has their version in the field. We don't have the luxury of decades of gradual development. Harmon considered the implications. Mendez's revelation explained many of the questions that had been troubling him. The similarities between their approach and the Dragon's design. Mendez's mysterious knowledge of advanced power systems. The sense that they were somehow retracing steps that had already been taken. Can you adapt this NASA technology to our specific needs, he asked. With help, Mendez confirmed, looking at Chen and Hawkins. It will require combining their expertise in AI and electromagnetic systems with the neural network approach. A true synthesis of old and new. For the first time since the failed test, Harmon felt a sense of genuine optimism. This wasn't just a patch for their current problems. It was potentially a leap forward, beyond what even the Dragon might have achieved. Let's get to work, he said. We have a presentation to make to General Carter and the congressional delegation in less than an hour. I want to show them not just what went wrong today, but how we're going to make it right tomorrow. As the team dispersed to gather the necessary data and prepare their presentation, Harmon reflected on the strange path that had led them to this moment. The original Thunderbolt research, seemingly lost but actually transformed and evolved through civilian channels. The attack on his son meant to derail their progress, but instead leading them toward a deeper understanding of the forces at play. The apparent sabotage that had exposed weaknesses they might otherwise have discovered too late. The enemy was formidable, but so was Steel Thunder, and they had something the enemy lacked: an integration of experience and innovation, of battle-tested wisdom and cutting-edge knowledge. A true partnership between generations. With that combination, Harmon believed, they could create something the world had never seen before. A weapon system that wasn't just technologically superior, but philosophically different. Not just a more effective tool of war, but potentially a more humane one, designed by people who understood the true cost of conflict. The real challenge wasn't building a better tank, it was building a better future. One where American technological superiority helped maintain peace rather than escalate tensions. One where the sacrifices of the past were honored by creating systems that might require fewer sacrifices in the future. That was a mission worthy of Steel Thunder's final ride. The sun was setting over the Nevada desert, casting long shadows across the test facility. Harmon stood in the observation tower, watching as technicians swarmed over the damaged prototype tank. After the failed test and subsequent revelations, General Carter had granted them a 72-hour window to implement Mendez's neural network solution before a second demonstration. 3 days to accomplish what would normally take months. It seemed impossible, but then Steel Thunder had made a career out of achieving the impossible. Captain Harmon, a voice came from behind him. May I have a word? Harmon turned to see James Chen standing in the doorway, his expression troubled. The young engineer had been working around the clock on integrating the NASA-derived technology with their existing systems, barely stopping for food or rest. Of course, Harmon replied, gesturing for Chen to join him at the railing. How's the integration proceeding? Ahead of schedule, surprisingly. Sergeant Mendez's neural network approach is elegant. It solves problems we've been struggling with for weeks. Chen paused, choosing his words carefully. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. I've been analyzing the code that caused the power surge during the test. You said you'd corrected those anomalies, Harmon prompted. I thought I had, but there was a deeper layer, a dormant routine triggered only under specific test conditions. Chen handed Harmon a tablet displaying complex lines of code. This isn't just sabotage, Captain. It's extraordinarily sophisticated, beyond what even the most talented individual could implement without extensive resources. You're saying this is the work of a foreign intelligence agency? Chen nodded. And not just any agency, the architecture, the methodology, it's distinctive, like a signature. The same signature I identified in systems compromised by the organization believed to be behind the Dragon tank development. Harmon frowned, scrolling through the analysis on the tablet. Most of the technical details were beyond his understanding, but the implications were clear enough. How was this code introduced into our systems? That's the troubling part. It required direct access to our secure development environment, someone physically present with high-level clearance. Chen hesitated. I've conducted a forensic analysis of the system logs. The modifications were made 3 days before the test, late at night when most of the team had left. Do you know who? Harmon asked, his voice deliberately neutral despite the tension building within him. The logs show Major Hawkins's credentials were used to access the system at 2:14 a.m. But, Chen's expression tightened, I don't believe she's responsible. Explain. The access pattern doesn't match her normal work habits. Major Hawkins is methodical, consistent. This was erratic, exploratory, like someone unfamiliar with the system architecture but trying to appear knowledgeable. Stolen credentials, Harmon suggested. That's my assessment. Major Hawkins typically leaves the facility by 10 p.m. Security logs confirm she exited at 9:47 p.m. that night and returned at 7:23 a.m. the following morning. Harmon considered this information. If Chen was correct, someone had used Hawkins' security credentials to access the system during hours when she wasn't present. But who? And how had they obtained her access codes? Have you shared this with anyone else? He asked. No, sir. After our previous conversation about potential infiltration, I thought it best to come directly to you. Good decision. Keep this between us for now. Continue your analysis, but maintain normal interactions with the rest of the team. I need time to process this. After Chen departed, Harmon remained at the observation window, his mind working through the implications. They had a traitor within their midst, someone with both the technical knowledge to implement sophisticated sabotage and the access to make it happen. Someone trying to frame Major Hawkins, or at least using her credentials as cover. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Westfield. Captain, General Carter has requested your presence at a secure briefing in 30 minutes. There have been developments regarding the Korean situation. My son? He's fine, Westfield assured him. This concerns the intelligence officer who provided the flash drive. There's been a development. The briefing took place in a windowless conference room deep within the facility's security zone. General Carter was already present, along with 2 men Harmon didn't recognize, wearing civilian clothes but carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of intelligence operatives. Richard, thank you for coming, Carter said, gesturing for him to take a seat. These gentlemen are from a branch of intelligence I'm not at liberty to specify. They have information relevant to our situation. The older of the 2 men, silver-haired with penetrating blue eyes, opened a folder on the table. Captain Harmon, I understand you've been investigating potential connections between your current project and the original Thunderbolt research from the 1980s. That's correct, Harmon confirmed, studying the man carefully. What I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels. It has been declassified specifically for this briefing based on national security considerations. He slid several photographs across the table. These were taken in 1984, approximately 6 months after Project Thunderbolt was officially terminated. The images showed a facility that looked remarkably similar to their current one, nestled in the Nevada desert. One photo in particular caught Harmon's attention, a group of men standing beside what appeared to be an early prototype of an electromagnetic weapon mounted on a modified tank chassis. The official story was that Thunderbolt had been canceled due to budget constraints, the intelligence officer continued. The reality is that it was compartmentalized and continued under a different designation. Only a handful of people knew the full scope of the program, including my colleague, Sergeant Mendez, Harmon noted. He's been working on technology derived from Thunderbolt through NASA. The man nodded. Civilian applications were one vector of continued development. Military applications were another. The most sensitive aspects were segregated into a special access program codenamed Thorium. He indicated another photograph, this one showing a young Asian man in a lab coat, working on electronic components. Dr. Kim Sun-young, a brilliant South Korean physicist recruited to work on the electromagnetic acceleration aspects of thorium. He had unprecedented access to the program's core technologies. Let me guess, Harmon said, the pieces beginning to fall into place. He disappeared. Not exactly. In October 1984, he returned to South Korea for his father's funeral. He never came back to the United States. 6 months later, intelligence sources confirmed he was working for a foreign military research institute. He defected, Harmon concluded, took Thunderbolt's secrets with him. That was the assessment at the time the younger intelligence officer spoke for the first time. However, recent information suggests a more complex scenario. This is where Colonel Sung Min Ho enters the picture, the Korean officer who passed the flash drive to your son before his apparent suicide. He opened a laptop displaying a series of documents. Colonel Sung was investigating historical espionage cases affecting Korean national security. He appears to have uncovered evidence that Dr. Kim didn't defect willingly. He was coerced, his family threatened. By whom, Harmon asked. A third party, an organization that wanted Thunderbolt's technology but couldn't risk stealing it directly from the United States. Using Kim as a cutout provided plausible deniability. The same organization now behind the Dragon tank, Harmon concluded. That's our assessment, the older officer confirmed. Colonel Sung discovered this connection and was attempting to provide evidence to American intelligence when he was killed. The flash drive he passed to your son contained not only technical data on the Dragon, but fragments of his investigation into the original technology theft. General Carter leaned forward. Richard, this changes our understanding of what we're facing. The Dragon isn't just built on stolen American research. It's the culmination of 4 decades of development based on that foundation. In many ways, it's the weapon Thunderbolt was meant to become. Which means we're not just catching up, Harmon said slowly. We're reclaiming what was ours to begin with. Exactly. But it also means our adversary has an intimate understanding of the fundamental principles we're working with. They know the vulnerabilities, the limitations. They've had 40 years to refine their approach. And they have a mole in our current program, Harmon added, someone actively sabotaging our efforts. The intelligence officers exchanged glances. We suspected as much, the older one said. Have you identified this individual? Not yet, but we're narrowing it down. The meeting continued for another hour, with the intelligence officers providing additional context about the original technology theft and its subsequent development. Throughout, Harmon's mind kept returning to the question of the traitor within their midst. Someone with technical knowledge, security access, and connections to the organization behind the Dragon. As he left the briefing, a new clarity had formed in his mind. The failed test, the attack on his son, the mysterious death of Colonel Sung, they were all connected by an invisible thread stretching back 4 decades to a betrayal that had altered the course of military technology development. Now that thread had led directly to their project, to someone on his team, someone desperate enough to sabotage their work, potentially risking American lives in future conflicts. Someone who needed to be identified and stopped before the next test, now just 48 hours away. He found Mendez alone in the power systems lab, surrounded by complex diagrams and components. The former tank driver looked up as Harmon entered, his expression shifting subtly upon seeing Harmon's face. You know, Mendez said simply, it wasn't a question. About thorium? Yes, just came from a briefing with intelligence officers. Mendez sighed, setting aside the component he'd been working on. I wanted to tell you from the beginning, but my security oaths... I understand, Harmon assured him. You were following protocols. Not just protocols, protection measures. Thorium wasn't just classified because of its technology. It was classified because of what happened to it, because of how it was compromised. Mendez gestured for Harmon to take a seat. What did they tell you about Kim Sun-young? South Korean physicist recruited for the program, disappeared after visiting Korea for a family funeral, reappeared working for a foreign power. They believe he was coerced, not a willing defector. Mendez nodded. That is the official version. The reality is more complicated. Kim didn't just disappear after the funeral. He tried to contact his American handlers, tried to warn them that he'd been approached, threatened. His communications were intercepted by someone inside Thorium. The original mole, Harmon said, understanding dawning. Yes, someone highly placed, someone who ensured Kim's warnings never reached the right people, someone who later helped craft the narrative that he was a willing defector. Mendez's eyes were hard with an old anger. The investigation afterwards was superficial, designed to fail. By the time some of us started asking the right questions, the trail was cold. You think the same person is behind the current sabotage? Not directly. They'd be retired by now, possibly dead. But organizations have long memories, long reach. Mendez leaned forward. There's something else you should know. Kim had a protege, a brilliant young engineer he mentored before his disappearance, someone who later rose to prominence in the defense establishment. Who? Dr. Angela Reed, now known as Colonel Westfield. The revelation hit Harmon like a physical blow. Westfield, the Pentagon liaison, the person coordinating all aspects of their project, the one with access to everything and everyone. Are you certain? He asked, his voice low. She changed her name, but not her brilliance. I recognized her the moment I arrived. She doesn't know that I know. Mendez's expression was grim. I've been watching her, waiting for her to make a move. The sabotage code, the security breach. It all fits. Chen found evidence that Hawkins's credentials were used to access the system during the night, when she wasn't present. Westfield would have the authority to access security systems, duplicate credentials. She has the technical background to implement the sabotage, and the connections to the organization behind the Dragon. Harmon considered this, weighing the evidence against his impression of the colonel. She'd been efficient, professional, seemingly dedicated to the project's success. But that could easily be a cover. The most effective spies were often the most convincing in their assumed roles. We need proof, he said finally. Concrete evidence, not just circumstantial connections. I've been working on that, Mendez replied. Setting a trap. The neural network approach we're implementing has a unique feature, an adaptive security protocol that logs all interactions in a way that can't be erased or modified. If Westfield attempts to compromise the system again, we'll have irrefutable evidence. How soon can this be implemented? It already has been. I installed it this morning. Now we wait. Harmon nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Keep this between us for now. Not even Thompson or Mitchell can know. We can't risk Westfield becoming suspicious. And the next test? Proceeds as scheduled, but with additional security measures in place. If Westfield is the mole, she'll make another attempt before the demonstration. She can't afford to let us succeed. As Harmon left the lab, his mind was racing with implications and contingencies. If Mendez was right, they'd been compromised from the beginning. Every step they'd taken, every breakthrough they'd achieved, had potentially been monitored and reported to their adversaries. But that cuts both ways, he realized. If Westfield was indeed the mole, she'd been feeding her handlers information about their approach. Information that was now fundamentally changing with the implementation of the neural network solution. A solution that hadn't been part of the original plan. For the first time, they might have a genuine advantage, an approach their enemy hadn't anticipated, an opportunity to turn the tables. He just had to ensure that Westfield didn't sabotage their second test, which meant keeping her close, giving her the access she'd expect while monitoring her every move. A dangerous game, but Steel Thunder had never shied away from danger. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for their target to spring it. Chapter 10, the final test. The morning of the second demonstration dawned clear and cold, a crisp desert winter day. Harmon had barely slept, dividing his time between overseeing final preparations for the test and monitoring the security protocols Mendez had implemented. So far, there had been no suspicious activity, no attempts to access the system using unauthorized credentials. Either Westfield had grown cautious, or she was waiting for the optimal moment to strike. Everything's in place, Thompson reported, joining Harmon at the observation point overlooking the testing range. The modified tank had been repaired and upgraded, incorporating the neural network interface that Mendez had developed with Chen and Hawkins. Externally, it looked much the same as before, but internally, it had been transformed. Crew assignments? Harmon asked. Chen will monitor the electromagnetic systems, Hawkins the targeting computers, Mendez the power distribution. I'll handle weapons control. Thompson paused. Mitchell insisted on being inside the tank during the test, said someone needed to observe the human factors. Harmon frowned. That's not protocol for an experimental firing. You tried telling him that. Said if we're building this for soldiers to use in combat, a doctor should evaluate the physiological impacts firsthand. Despite his concerns, Harmon felt a surge of pride. His old team stepping up as they always had, each in their own way. Taking risks because they believed in the mission. Believed in each other. Where's Westfield? He asked, maintaining a casual tone. Coordinating with his new congressional delegation. After the failure of the first test, we've got different observers this time. More technical, experts, fewer politicians. Keep me updated on her movements, discreetly. Thompson raised an eyebrow but asked no questions. Years of working together had taught him to trust Harmon's instincts. As the morning progressed, The facility hummed with purposeful activity. Technical teams conducted final checks on the prototype. Security personnel established a perimeter around the test range. Observers began to gather in the protected viewing areas. Through it all, Harmon maintained awareness of Westfield's position. She moved through the facility with her usual efficiency, reviewing protocols, briefing the congressional observers, coordinating with General Carter's staff. Nothing in her behavior suggested anything unusual. Until 2 hours before the scheduled test, she disappeared from the main coordination center. She's entered the secure server room, Mendez reported via their private communication channel, alone, using her command override to bypass the two-person authentication requirement. Is the monitoring system active? Harmon asked. Yes, we're recording everything, visual and digital. Keep the channel open, I'm heading there now. The secure server room was located in the heart of the facility, a climate-controlled space filled with the humming racks of computers that manage their most sensitive data. As Harmon approached, he saw that the normal security guards had been temporarily reassigned, the corridor empty. He entered his override code, the door sliding open silently. Inside, Colonel Westfield stood before a main terminal, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. She froze at the sound of his entrance, then slowly turned. Captain Harmon, Shah said, her voice perfectly steady. I was just conducting a final security sweep before the demonstration. In a restricted area without proper authentication, Harmon replied, stepping further into the room. That's against protocol, Colonel. As project coordinator, I have discretion to override standard protocols when necessary. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Is there a problem, Captain? Yes, Harmon said simply. You're attempting to sabotage our test, just as you sabotaged the first one, using Major Hawkins' stolen credentials. For a moment, Westfield maintained her composure, her expression betraying nothing. Then a slight smile curved her lips. You have proof of these allegations, I assume? We do. The neural network security system has been recording your activities, every keystroke, every access attempt. Harmon took another step forward. We know who you are, Dr. Reed. We know about your connection to Kim Soon-young, about your role in ensuring his warnings never reached American intelligence. At the mention of her former name, something flickered in Westfield's eyes. Not fear, but a cold calculation. Impressive detective work, Captain. Mendez, I presume. He always was too clever for his own good. It's over, Colonel. Security teams are on their way. Your handler will be waiting a long time for your next report. Westfield's smile widened, becoming almost genuine. You really don't understand, do you? This isn't about espionage in the traditional sense. It's about balance, about ensuring no single nation achieves too great an advantage. By stealing American technology? By sabotaging our defense capabilities? By maintaining equilibrium, she corrected. The Dragon tank isn't being developed as a first-strike weapon. It's a counterbalance to American technological supremacy, a deterrent. A deterrent that could cost American lives if conflict ever breaks out, Harmon countered. That's not balance. That's betrayal. Westfield's expression hardened. Such a simplistic worldview, Captain. Black and white, us versus them. The world isn't that clear-cut. Never has been. Maybe not, Harmon acknowledged, but some lines shouldn't be crossed. You chose your side. Now you'll face the consequences. The door behind him slid open, revealing Thompson and a security team, weapons drawn. Colonel Angela Westfield, you're under arrest for espionage and sabotage, Thompson announced formally. For a brief moment, tension filled the room. Harmon half expected Westfield to resist, to attempt some desperate move. Instead, she simply straightened her uniform jacket and offered her wrists. This changes nothing, Captain, she said as the security team secured her. The technology exists. The balance will be maintained, with or without my involvement. We'll see about that, Harmon replied. The test proceeds in 90 minutes, without your interference. After Westfield had been taken away, Mendez joined Harmon in the server room, confirming that their security systems remained intact. She managed to implement some ominous modifications, but the neural network detected and isolated them. We've purged her access from all systems. Good work, Harmon said. What's your assessment of the prototype's readiness? We're good to go. The neural network interface is functioning optimally. All systems are integrated and balanced. Mendez hesitated. There is one more thing. The old crew, Steel Thunder, we've been talking. We want to be inside the tank during the test. All of us. Harmon stared at him. That's against every safety protocol. If something goes wrong, Then we face it together, Mendez said firmly. This is our project, Rich. Our legacy. We started this journey together 35 years ago. We should see it through the same way. The sentiment struck a chord deep within Harmon. Steel Thunder, reunited for one final mission. It was fitting in a way that transcended mere regulations. I'll clear it with General Carter, he decided. But Mitchell stays in the observation bunker. We need a doctor monitoring from outside, just in case. When the moment of the test arrived, Harmon found himself seated in the commander's position of the modified tank, Thompson beside him at the gunner station, Mendez at the driver's controls. The familiar configuration, so reminiscent of their days in Desert Storm, felt both nostalgic and strangely new. The advanced interfaces and displays a stark contrast to the mechanical simplicity of their old Abrams. Chen and Hawkins occupied the additional stations created specifically for the prototype, surrounded by screens monitoring the electromagnetic systems and targeting computers. All stations, report status, Harmon ordered, falling naturally into the old command rhythm. Weapon systems online, Thompson confirmed, targeting matrix calibrated. Power distribution balanced, Mendez added. Neural network interface functioning within optimal parameters. Electromagnetic coils charged and stable, Chen reported. Field integrity at 100%. Targeting computers online, Hawkins concluded. Target acquisition locked. Harmon opened the communication channel to the observation bunker. Control, this is Thunder Actual. Prototype is fully operational and ready for test fire sequence. Thunder Actual, this is Control, Mitchell's voice came through clearly. You are cleared to proceed with the test fire sequence. All observers are secured. Range is clear. Acknowledge Control. Beginning countdown. Harmon looked at each member of his crew, receiving nods of confirmation from each. Commencing test in 30 seconds. The prototype hummed with contained power. The neural network interface managing the flow of energy between the conventional drive systems and the electromagnetic weapon. Display showed all parameters holding steady, none of the alarming fluctuations that had preceded the failure of the first test. 10 seconds, Harmon announced. Final confirmations. Electromagnetic field stable, Chen reported. Power flow optimal. Target locked, Thompson added. Firing solution computed. Neural network compensating for all variables, Mendez confirmed. Green across the board. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire! Thompson pressed the firing control. Unlike conventional tank cannons, there was no violent recoil, no explosion of propellant. Instead, a high-pitched whine built to a crescendo, followed by a sharp crack as the electromagnetic field accelerated the projectile to hypersonic velocity. On the range, the target, a composite array designed to simulate the Dragon's advanced armor, disintegrated completely. Fragments scattered across hundreds of meters. For a moment, everyone in the tank held their breath, waiting for alarms, for signs of system failure. Instead, the display showed all systems functioning normally, the neural network adjusting power distribution to compensate for the energy expenditure. Control Thunder Actual, Harmon reported. Test fire successful, all systems nominal. The observation bunker erupted in cheers, audible even through the tank's thick armor. In the prototype, the crew exchanged looks of triumph and relief. Ready for second target engagement, Thompson announced, already adjusting his targeting controls. Proceed, Harmon ordered. Let's show them what this machine can really do. Over the next 30 minutes, they conducted a series of increasingly complex firing tests. Multiple targets, moving targets, targets partially obscured by smoke and terrain features. The prototype performed flawlessly, the neural network learning and adapting with each engagement, optimizing power usage and targeting parameters in real time. By the time they concluded the demonstration, even the most skeptical observers in the bunker had been won over. The technology worked. The integration challenges had been solved. The electromagnetic tank was no longer a theoretical concept, but a proven reality. As they powered down the systems, preparing to exit the prototype, Harmon felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just because the test had succeeded, but because of what that success represented. The culmination of decades of work, the reclaiming of technology that had been stolen, the vindication of the original Thunderbolt vision. Most importantly, the creation of a defensive capability that would help maintain American security in an increasingly uncertain world. Well done, everyone, he said simply, his voice conveying more than mere words could express. The crew of Steel Thunder, reunited for this final mission, had once again proven why they had been legendary in their time. Not just because of their individual skills, but because of how those skills combined, how they complemented and enhanced each other. That, Harmon reflected, was the real lesson here. Technology, no matter how advanced, was only as effective as the humans who operated it. The neural network interface was powerful precisely because it mirrored the human dynamics of a well-coordinated tank crew, learning and adapting, compensating for weaknesses, enhancing strengths. As they emerged from the prototype to the applause of the gathered observers, Harmon knew that this success would resonate far beyond the Nevada desert. It would shape the future of American armor, influence the strategic calculations of potential adversaries, perhaps even help maintain the delicate balance of power that prevented conflicts from erupting into full-scale war. Steel Thunder's final mission was complete, and their legacy was secured. Chapter 11, Legacy and Future. 3 months after the successful demonstration, Harmon stood on the parade ground at Fort Benning, watching as the first production model of the M1A4 Thunderbolt rolled past the reviewing stand. Its sleek profile, with a distinctive elongated turret housing the electromagnetic cannon, represented the culmination of their work, the transition from prototype to operational weapon system. Beside him stood Thompson, Mendez, and Mitchell, all in civilian attire but standing with the unmistakable bearing of career soldiers. They had been invited as honored guests for this unveiling ceremony, their contributions to the Thunderbolt program now a matter of official record, though many of the technical details remained classified. "She's beautiful," Thompson remarked as the tank completed its demonstration run, the cannon traversing smoothly to track simulated targets. "Reminds me of our old girl, but evolved, like seeing your child all grown up." "The neural network interface is already being adapted for other applications," Mendez added. "Naval systems, aerospace, even civilian technologies. The concept of adaptive integration is revolutionizing multiple fields. And the medical monitoring systems we incorporated are saving lives," Mitchell noted. "The ability to track crew physiological responses in real time, to predict and prevent stress-related errors, that's a game changer for all military vehicles." Harmon nodded, pride warming him despite the winter chill. Their work had indeed extended far beyond the original mandate, influencing technological development across multiple domains. "Captain Harmon," a familiar voice called. Turning, he saw General Carter approaching, accompanied by a younger officer Harmon immediately recognized despite the bandages still visible at his hairline. "Michael," he said, breaking into a genuine smile. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Last-minute arrangement," his son replied, returning the smile. "General Carter thought it would be appropriate, given my inadvertent contribution to the program." "Your contribution was hardly inadvertent," Carter corrected. "Your handling of the intelligence from Colonel Sung was exemplary, as was your recovery from the subsequent attack." After the exchange of greetings, Carter drew them all aside to a more private area of the reviewing stand. "There are some developments you should be aware of regarding Colonel Westfield, or Dr. Reed, as she was formerly known." "Has she revealed her contacts?" Harmon asked. The former project coordinator had been in military custody since her arrest, undergoing intensive interrogation. "Not explicitly, but her statements, combined with other intelligence, have allowed us to identify key nodes in the network she was part of." Carter's expression was grave. "It's more extensive than we initially believed and has deeper historical roots." "Going back to the original Thunderbolt breach," Mendez suggested. "And beyond," Carter confirmed. "This appears to be an organization dedicated to technological equilibrium, as Westfield described it, ensuring no single nation maintains too great an advantage in critical military technologies." "By stealing and distributing American innovations," Thompson said with clear disapproval. "Yes, though they would characterize it differently, as preventing destabilizing technological supremacy." Carter shook his head slightly. "I'm not defending their methods, merely reporting their apparent motivation. It's important we understand what we're dealing with." "Has the Dragon tank been deployed?" Harmon asked, focusing on the practical implications. "Limited numbers, according to our latest intelligence. Their production capabilities don't match ours, and with the Thunderbolt now moving into full production, we've regained the technological edge." Carter gestured toward the M1A4 now parked at the far end of the parade ground. "Thanks in large part to your work." The conversation shifted to more immediate matters, the integration of the Thunderbolt into existing armor units, the training programs being developed, the tactical doctrine evolving around its capabilities. Michael, now fully recovered and reassigned to the armor school as an instructor, would be among the first to train on the new system. As the official ceremonies concluded, Harmon found himself standing alone with his son, watching as the Thunderbolt was prepared for transport to its permanent home with the first operational unit. "I'm proud of what you accomplished, Dad," Michael said quietly. "Not just the technology, but how you handled everything. The security breach, the sabotage, the personal danger." "I had good people around me," Harmon replied, "as I always have." "Steel Thunder," Michael nodded. "The stories you told me growing up, they shaped who I am, what I wanted to become." Harmon felt a tightness in his chest. For so many years, he'd regretted sharing those stories, fearing they had glamorized military service, led his son toward danger. Now he saw them differently. Not as war stories, but as lessons in leadership, in responsibility, in the bonds formed through shared purpose and sacrifice. "There's something I've been meaning to give you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small object, a challenge coin, worn from decades of handling. On one side, the insignia of their old unit. On the other, crudely etched by hand, Steel Thunder. "Thompson had these made after Desert Storm," Harmon explained, placing it in his son's palm. "Only 4 exist, one for each member of the crew." Michael stared at the coin, understanding its significance. "Dad, I can't take this. It's part of your history, your bond with the others." "Which is exactly why I want you to have it," Harmon insisted. "Not just as a keepsake, but as a reminder of what can be accomplished when the right people come together at the right moment. When experience and innovation combine, when the lessons of the past inform the challenges of the future." Michael closed his fingers around the coin, nodding his acceptance of both the gift and its deeper meaning. As they turned to leave the parade ground, Harmon caught sight of Thompson, Mendez, and Mitchell waiting near the exit. His old crew, his friends, the men who had shared the defining experiences of his military career, and who had returned when called upon for one final mission. Steel Thunder had indeed ridden again. And though this chapter was closing, their legacy would continue, embodied in the gleaming new tanks bearing the Thunderbolt name, in the neural network technology that would revolutionize multiple fields, and in the son who would carry forward the lessons they had learned together. Some battles were fought with steel and fire, but the most important victories were achieved through knowledge, through innovation, through the courage to face challenges that seemed insurmountable, through the strength that came from standing together, even when the odds seemed overwhelming. That was the true legacy of Steel Thunder. Not just what they had accomplished, but how they had accomplished it. Not just the battles they had won, but the bonds they had formed. Not just their past glory, but their lasting impact on the future. As Harmon joined his old crew, their conversation turning to plans for dinner, for reconnecting beyond the confines of the project that had brought them together again, he felt a deep contentment. This reunion hadn't just been about recapturing past camaraderie. It had been about forging something new, something that would endure long after they were gone. The Thunderbolt tank would defend American interests for decades to come, but the principles that had guided its creation, the integration of experience and innovation, the balance of human judgment and technological capability, the importance of trust and teamwork, those would endure even longer. That was a legacy worthy of Steel Thunder's final mission. Chapter 12, The Unending Race. 1 year later, Harmon stood at the window of his Virginia home, watching as spring rain transformed his garden into a riot of color. Retirement, the real kind this time, had been an adjustment. After the intensity of the Thunderbolt project, ordinary life had initially seemed painfully mundane. But he had found new rhythms, new purposes, consulting work that kept his mind engaged without the pressure of daily crises. A rekindled relationship with Margaret, not romantic but warmly friendly, the bitterness of their divorce softened by time and mutual understanding. Regular visits with Michael, now a major and one of the Army's foremost experts on the Thunderbolt system. The doorbell interrupted his reflections. Checking his watch, he realized his visitor was precisely on time, as expected. General Carter, recently promoted to Army Chief of Staff, had requested this meeting personally, emphasizing its confidential nature. "Max," Harmon greeted him at the door, "right on schedule." "Some habits never change," Carter replied with a slight smile. "Thank you for making time, Rich." They settled in Harmon's study, declining his offer of drinks. Whatever had brought Carter here, it clearly wasn't a social call. "There have been developments," the general began, opening a secure tablet. "Intelligence has identified a new weapon system in early development stages, codenamed Phoenix." He showed Harmon satellite imagery of a remote testing facility, focusing on what appeared to be a vehicle of unusual configuration. Initial analysis suggests this is a direct response to our Thunderbolt deployment, a next-generation system designed specifically to counter our electromagnetic capabilities. That was inevitable, Harmon observed. Every technological advance prompts a countermeasure. It's the nature of military development. True, but the timeline is concerning. We expected a 5 to 7 year development cycle before seeing a credible counter. These images suggest they're much further along than anticipated. Harmon studied the photographs more carefully. They've accelerated their research, which means either a technological breakthrough or another security breach, Carter finished grimly. We've been investigating that possibility. So far, no evidence of compromised systems or personnel, but the Phoenix incorporates design elements that seem familiar. Familiar how? Carter manipulated the tablet, bringing up technical schematics. These were extracted from a secure database 3 months ago, part of a theoretical study on advanced defensive systems for the Thunderbolt, systems that were never implemented in the production model. The implications were clear. Someone had accessed highly classified research and passed it to the same organization that had developed the Dragon that was now developing the Phoenix. The technology theft continues, Harmon said, a coldness settling in his stomach, despite Westfield's arrest, despite all our enhanced security measures. It appears so, which brings me to the purpose of my visit. Carter set aside the tablet, meeting Harmon's gaze directly. We're establishing a new program, not just to counter the Phoenix, but to fundamentally change how we approach technological security, to break the cycle of innovation, theft, and counter-innovation that has defined this relationship for decades. And you want my involvement, Harmon surmised. In an advisory capacity, yes. Your experience with Thunderbolt, with identifying and neutralizing insider threats, makes you uniquely qualified. Carter paused. There's more. Michael has been selected to lead the operational aspects of the program. His performance with Thunderbolt training has been exemplary, and his first-hand experience with the Korean intelligence connection is valuable. Pride mingled with concern in Harmon's chest. His son taking on a role that would place him at the center of this dangerous game of technological espionage and counter-espionage. Has he accepted? He has, conditionally. He wants your input first. Harmon wasn't surprised. Despite their sometimes strained relationship, Michael had always valued his counsel, particularly in professional matters. What's the program's approach, he asked. Multifaceted. Enhanced technical security, certainly, but also psychological operations, counterintelligence, strategic deception. Carter's expression was solemn. We're not just trying to protect our technology anymore, Rich. We're trying to fundamentally disrupt their acquisition methodology, to make them question the reliability of what they steal, the loyalty of their sources, the integrity of their intelligence. Psychological warfare applied to technological espionage. Harmon nodded slowly. Ambitious and risky. Very. Which is why we need people who understand both the technical and human elements. People who recognize that this isn't just about machines, but about the people who create them, operate them, and sometimes betray them. Harmon rose, moving to a cabinet in the corner of his study. From a locked drawer, he removed a small wooden box. Inside lay 3 challenge coins, identical to the one he had given Michael. The remaining tokens of Steel Thunder. We never sought this kind of work, he said, touching one of the coins reflectively. We were tankers, combat soldiers. But circumstances pulled us into this world of shadows and secrets. And now it's pulling the next generation in as well. You can decline, Carter said. Both of you can. There would be no shame in it. You've served your country with distinction already. Harmon replaced the coins in their box, his decision already made. Not from a sense of obligation or duty, but from a deeper understanding of what was at stake, of the continuing need to balance technological power with human wisdom, to ensure that innovation serves security rather than threatening it. I'll speak with Michael, he said, but I think you already know what our answer will be. Carter nodded, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. I had hoped as much. The program begins formally next month, operational headquarters at Fort Belvoir, disguised as a routine modernization initiative. After the general departed, Harmon returned to his window, watching as the rain gradually subsided, leaving the garden glistening in renewed sunlight. The cycle continued: technological advance, countermeasure, countermeasure, an endless race with profound implications for global security. But within that cycle, there was room for human judgment, for ethical consideration, for the wisdom that came from experience. That would be his contribution. And Michael's building not just better machines, but better processes, ensuring that technology served human needs rather than dictating human choices. Steel Thunder had completed its final combat mission decades ago, its last technological contribution with the Thunderbolt project. But its legacy continued in this new challenge, this new arena of conflict, where the weapons were information and deception rather than steel and fire. The race would never end, but with the right people leading it, guiding it, tempering technological capability with human judgment, it could be managed, kept within bounds that preserve both security and humanity. That, Harmon reflected, was perhaps the most important legacy of all. Not the tanks they had commanded or the technology they had developed, but the example they had set. The demonstration that even in the most technical, most advanced aspects of warfare, the human element remained essential, remained primary. As Steel Thunder had proven time and again, it wasn't just what you fought with that mattered, but who you fought alongside. Not just the capability of your weapons, but the character of those who wielded them. In the continuing technological race, that lesson would be their enduring contribution, their true legacy, carried forward by the next generation of warriors and innovators. By people like Michael, who understood both the power of technology and its limitations, both the necessity of progress and the importance of principle. The sun broke fully through the clouds, illuminating Harmon's garden in brilliant clarity. A new day, a new challenge, and the continuing promise that, whatever the future held, there would be good people rising to meet it, guided by the lessons of the past, but not bound by them. Steel Thunder rode on, its spirit embodied in new forms, new missions, new generations. The thunder of its passage echoing through time, a reminder of what could be achieved when courage, innovation, and integrity combined in common purpose. A legacy not of steel, but of resolve, not of thunder, but of unwavering determination. A legacy that would endure as long as there were challenges to be met, dangers to be confronted, and futures to be secured. A legacy of iron resolve.